We have a special guest here today from last year. She was a Partners last year graduate. She still has her name tag. Awesome. And she's going to talk about her project. And I know several of you have expressed interest in the website. So we will see that and let her take it away. Allison McNeil.
Hi, my name is Allie McNeil. I am a 2022 PIPA cohort graduate from last year's class. And first, I wanted to introduce you to myself and a little bit about what this past year after graduating PIPA has done for me and what I have garnered and what I hope y'all will continue to do after this graduation and going forward. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my project. When I applied to PIPA, my expectation was to become a better advocate. And it has far exceeded my expectations in many other ways. Not only as it helps me become a better advocate for my son, but for others in my community, and has really opened my eyes to the needs of our state. In my own personal family, what I learned in PIPA, I've been able to bring forward for my son. He was in a self-contained classroom up until 6th grade, and then COVID hit. And last year, coincidentally, my first year in PIPA, he was able to then attend school full-time in a regular classroom, making all A's and B's on a regular core curriculum, and joined a sports team, not as an assistant, but as an athlete. And so this year he is a freshman at Northridge High School in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And what many years ago I said might not have been possible, I would never say again. The sky's the limit. And I know that, and I hope that you all use what you've learned here, not only to affect your personal lives and your family members, but those in your community. In my career, I have a lot of experience in medical marketing and website design. I used that along with a real desire for my husband's job. We had to move many times across the country. That always left me scrambling for services and resources. Even in some of the best funded states, you still couldn't find resources or found out about them too many years too late. That's where Access Alabama, the idea for Access Alabama, was born out of. And that's what I chose to do my project last year on for PIPA. Like this says, you know, as a parent of a special needs child, both of my children have special needs. My son is biological and our daughter is adopted. We've always needed those local resources, and it's not easy. While in the state of Alabama, we have lots of resources, finding the resources, explaining to others the resources available, and accessing those can be very difficult. This explains, you know, when we moved to Alabama from North Carolina, finding resources for our son with multiple disabilities was daunting and overwhelming. Our son was on a waiver program in North Carolina. I was lucky enough to have a great relationship with his case manager in North Carolina, and she cared enough to call here to the waiver program in Alabama and find a consistent waiver that was consistent with what we had in North Carolina. I can't imagine if I wouldn't have had that. It would have been very overwhelming. My focus is to empower those with disabilities and their loved ones, their family and friends, with the resources at their fingertips. So this is my project timeline. This goes back from last year. On the, I'm at the point of continuing development of remaining region, fund ADA compliance, the continued development for that, and launch for statewide use. So last year, we had someone come and talk to us about federal ADA compliance. Right now, the feds have to be ADA compliant on all their websites. That includes for those who are vision impaired. And the development on a website side of that definitely increases cost when you're looking at that. So I don't know if that speaker spoke this year. Did they, Linda? He was out of Washington. It was, yes, and he didn't. Okay. It was very interesting. And I think it's important if we're going to have a resource that everyone can access it, and maybe we can lead the way for the rest of the state, because obviously it's only a federal compliance right now. But it is a goal. So my goal has always been to provide Alabamians with disabilities, their families and caretakers, access to all the resources throughout the state. This year has brought a lot of change for me personally with the recent medical issue. And even that on a personal level has opened my eyes to the importance of websites such as this. Having these resources at our fingertips is really important in 2023 and beyond. The work still left to do. Partner with PIPA cohorts and community to continue to research and develop the remaining region databases. This is an ongoing thing and will remain ongoing. So finding good partners, while I know my region quite well, there's plenty of other regions in the state that I may not know of wonderful resources that exist. And that's why that is so important. Continue facilitating a rapport with state and local agencies and community resources to obviously grow the database. I've been working with an attorney to finalize 501c3 documents for the IRS, and so that we can I can get actual funding and apply for funding to keep the website going. Acquire funding to become and remain fully ADA compliant, and maintain the website in that manner so that we can be a standout for Alabama and hopefully lead the way to what the state will do and others. Future goals are to partner with other cohorts, agencies, and peers to add videos of all available waiver programs. I think that would really benefit people. I know that's a struggle when people ask me or come to me and have questions. And create a marketing plan to advertise the site and work with federal and state agencies to promote Access Alabama website. The world of disability and technology is ever changing. Again, I've harped on this. ADA compliance will be crucial with this website, and allow us to be a guide stone to other website designers, programmers in Alabama and across the US. And again, while we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of agencies, we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of nonprofits, and a lot of them do list resources, but they're not generally all compiled into one. And it's a lot for an overwhelmed caregiver, an overwhelmed parent, or an overwhelmed person, or anybody to just go and find. So I hope this will allow, cross-agency and nonprofit organizations to collaborate for the greater good. And I'd love collaborate with some of y'all. So does anybody have any questions? Sure.
As as we talk to some of our current graduates and some of our previous graduates, oftentimes challenges comes up. So are you able to talk a little bit about the specifics of some of the challenges that you had to go through, and how did you go through them? If I
Yes.
can, if that's the correct question. Because sometimes people, you know, they kind of get scared because of the challenges that they have to face, and, you know, just roadblocks, so to speak. And so just kind of talk a little bit about that if you're able to.
Absolutely. I mean, I can say there's challenges in this specific instance, on the website and design portion of it. Like I said, I want to make sure that there's ADA compliance, that there's all different kind of compliance that I have to reach on this, but also in life and in these groups of people, you're going to run into challenges. I feel like a lot of times my life is a constant moving challenge. The goalpost just moves throughout it, and that's okay. There's joy in the ride of that and in the ride of life. But for me too, I can speak to, there's been times this year, and especially very recently, when I had a major health crisis of my own and had to put this to the side and not get the stuff that I wanted done on it. But the reality of that is you've just got to keep plugging away at it. You're going to run into challenges with different people that you face at different state agencies. You're going to, I mean, there's wonderful people like Linda and Daryl who are very happy to help. And I would say lean into those people, and but you've got to work through the challenges. And if you work through the challenges, you will reap the rewards. Huh?
This is Jess. So I'm deaf, so I just happen to know about different resources. And I was just curious if you were familiar with the Alabama resource website that is out there as well, because they do more of the bigger organizations. So it's your goal to get more of the grassroots organizations and more individualized to these counties. So for example, their website, you could like type in disability or what resources you need for your family and child, and it pulls up everything. So, and that one's been interesting to me because I know who it's funded by. Have you considered reaching out to some of those ITNIs to see if they would support you, like Alabama Department of Mental Health, Alabama Department of Education? They all sponsor this website. So I was wondering about that.
Okay. I do know what website you're talking about. Yes. And I guess the little bit difference on that would be to even dive deeper in our different regions. Right. And so in on this website, you can't, it's divided up by regions. And like, for example, back pre-COVID, I worked at a program called Arts and Autism. It's a program for children on the autism spectrum. And there's tons of people, even, and I'm from Tuscaloosa, there's tons of people living in Tuscaloosa who have children with autism that don't even know that we're down on 8th Street and it exists. So, so heavy on the regional and state and what the state offers. So I think that's right. I think that that's a fantastic idea, and maybe see who is sending out, like what packets are going out. That's what we would do when I did medical marketing, like we would give like new mothers. It was in the form of a magazine type profile. And so having that access in there, and that's my goal with some funding that we can pay for some print marketing and digital marketing and so forth to show the website. So I'm sorry, Alex. Am I not yelling loud enough? I am like a quarter Italian, so. Okay. If you want to go down, Alex. If you want to click on resources. So currently, these are the different resources, regions, that we have in Alabama. And these resources are by region, and you can just click on you just click on 2 or 1. Hold on. I'm hoping that it's going to pop up right. Yeah. And if you like, just click on Easter Seals of Alabama. There you go. So it'll take you directly to it. It gives you a synopsis of what the resource is. And my other goal is to aggregate it so it's searchable by region. Those are just further goals down the line. And to have, all of your resources that you might need in that area. And you would be surprised. I mean, it kind of mushroom clouds out. So in a region, there may be tons of different, let's say, emergency transportation services for the disabled in certain regions and certain phone numbers and certain websites that you need to go to. They might not all be in the same location, might vary by city and county within the region. And those are obviously state resources. And then you've got your, local nonprofit resources and others. Sure.
So it has a tab for submissions. Is that for people in the community to say, hey, here's a resource?
Yes. So the submissions tab, and you can click on that. That allows you to submit to have your resource posted and to work with other people in the community on these resources, these nonprofits, and so forth. And what category you fall under. That comes to me. And then contact. That's just another way to contact me. Yes.
This is Jennifer. Good morning, Allie.
Good morning.
Are the resources that are statewide listed in each region, for instance?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what's up right now that's just a short list of some statewide resources to give y'all an example. Like all of this I put into a database, an Excel database, and aggregate it in there, and then I'll update it and upload it to the website. But right now I'm working on some different aggregation for it. So I just limited on some state resources to those different regions, but all of the state resources will be listed under each region, plus the local regional resources as well under those specific resources.
So like, for instance, Down Syndrome, Alabama, which is quote headquartered in the Birmingham area, but yet we assist persons all over the state. So if someone in Winston County, if they clicked on region 2, is Down Syndrome, Alabama going to show up there?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I wanted to,
Yes.
for clarification. Okay.
So statewide resources would show up, but like, let's say, somebody help me, like a regional resource or a regional resource office, those specific. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes, you'd be that regional resource. And also like if it was something of West Alabama, even if it's a state, even if there's a statewide resource, or maybe they're headquartered out of, but they also have other offices, it's going to have the regional office and the headquartered office on the resource page. Yes. And, you know, the goal is to have, you know, the community use these. So school counselors, doctors, and state agency workers and so forth. Yep.
I had a comment from online. Kim Spangler says, great job. Allie, you are literally creating access. She also mentions that the ARC chapters serve regionally.
Thank you, Kim. Tell Colby hi. But I would love to work with y'all, and I'd love to get your information. But it's wonderful to be here, and I cannot wait to hear about all of your projects. And I hope that you use what you've learned this year as a jumping off point for the future.
Thank you, Allie. And yes, please upload your information. And again, this cohort, as hers was, it's a statewide, you're from different regions. So please look at this website and submit to her all the different resources that you have, because everybody here has said the same thing. How do you find things? Where do you do it? So it's a great project, and we want it to be sustainable and something for all of us to use. So Access Alabama. So thank you, Allie. And so now we're going to go into the leadership projects for this year. And I've looked at most of them, and y'all have done a great job, and you've got some great ideas, and really looking forward to seeing them work through the process. So we're going to get started, and we're going to have our first group will be, yes, I numbered them. How about that? So
Well, hey, y'all. Okay. All right. So our project is improving deaf and hard of hearing children's Alabama's access to communication, language, and literacy. So this project is really important to us for multiple reasons. But before we talk about the why on our project, we're going to talk about the problem of what we've seen across the state of Alabama with our own advocacy, our own personal experiences, and some research and data. So I'm going to let Emily kick off as well on that.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll go to the next.
Oh, we just.
This is Emily Bernard.
I'm Jess Sisson. Oh. Technical difficulty.
Okay, so we'll start with our problem. Statistically, children with hearing loss are going to achieve 1 to 4 grade levels lower than their peers, especially with reading. We're talking about reading. So a lot of them never learn to read higher than a 3rd or 4th grade level. Feel like I'm beating a dead horse when we talk about early intervention, but if difficulties are not identified early, then, you know, catching up is a huge issue. Reading achievement will never be possible. And then we found a lack of understanding communication is a special consideration under IDEA. And so there's a lot of things that have to be taken into account if a child has an IEP. And there's not a lot of understanding. Deafness and hard of hearing is a low incidence disability. So a lot of districts are not real familiar with all the things they're supposed to look into when they're looking at an IEP for a child. And so there's Alabama does not have a communication plan or like a deaf bill of rights or anything like that. So that kind of compounds the issue with the special considerations not being taken into an account. And then Mastering the Maze is a policy that special education directors look at for guidance in the state of Alabama. And if you get on there, there's nothing for special considerations other than to address it. So, so there's not a lot of guidance given to school systems about how to address those issues.
And one of the things I want to highlight on this, the very first point is actually from the Alabama Reading Campaign Literacy that Governor Kay Ivey put together. These are the exact words from the recommendation from all the research that they did. So this is not new information. And I like to highlight this, and I want to pull this into our presentation because that in 2020, Alabama Literacy, before they passed the literacy law, they gave recommendations and they actually include hearing loss in those recommendations. And we haven't seen a lot come out of that, even though the focus with the literacy part was more identification and newborn screening, which we know is still a big issue in Alabama, especially for children with hearing loss because it's low incident disability. But I love, especially the point below, if difficulties are not identified early, re-achievement will not be possible. And we have a ton of research that backs that as well. So I do want to highlight that this is something that Governor Kay Ivey did sign off of, and it did come from the 2020 campaign as well. Oh yeah.
So kind of our proposal, collaboration with a team of stakeholders across the state of Alabama who have expertise in this area and experience working with children with hearing differences in a diverse range of modalities and languages. So that would include spoken language, ASL, cued speech, total communication. There's a lot of options for communication. And then deliverable documents and recommendations for Mastering the Maze. So a communication plan has already been developed by the same stakeholders and signed off on by basically all of the big stakeholders in Alabama that represent all the different communication modes. So there is a communication plan already available. We also are seeking to update the compliance verification form. So that is when you're identifying a child for an IEP, that is the form that the list of assessments that must be done to develop an IEP. It's pretty sparse right now for hearing impairment and deaf blindness. So we want to make sure that we include like a literacy assessment to see where that child is, since we know that tends to be an issue because that's not currently part of the assessments required. And then we also plan to advocate with the Board of Education to update the guidance on Mastering the Maze so that the special education directors have more information about how to properly assess and get these children the services and accommodations that they need.
Alex, if you're willing to pull up the communication plan, we actually have it. We thought about printing it off, but it is about 7 pages just because it's pretty extensive. And even though we have the current draft right now, we have gotten feedback from other school districts and providers as well that they want us to reduce it a little bit more. So that is an ongoing project within Alabama Hands and Voices. So where me and Emily stand more is we are working with Alabama Hands and Voices, who the president is Maria Katz, and she's one of our stakeholders. So they are more working on the behind the scenes of how it may be simplified, but we're still trying to get in front of the State Department of Education just to give our ask. So Alex is going to pull up the link if it works.
It's available on the Alabama Hands and Voices website under resources. Some school systems are already using this plan voluntarily to help them out. While he's pulling that up, I know some of you may have heard about a recent Supreme Court decision, Perez versus Sturgis. It was a unanimous decision for a deaf student to be able to seek compensatory damages under ADA. So if this child had had a workable, usable communication plan, this would have never happened. So, okay. So here it is, page 1. So It is very thorough. It could probably also be used by children with other communication issues outside, but it was developed specifically for hearing impairment.
The majority of the author that wrote this communication plan is Dr. Julie Beth Jones. She pulled over 7 different communication plans across the nation to develop this one. And after she did the most of the input, and then we gave it to the stakeholders. So Andy Hill, who's my mom, is one of them, Marie Katz, and Susan at Real, and somebody else from AIDB. Yes. We got a lot of input on it. And so the thing that I want to let people know, this is the 15th version we have. We have worked on this plan for 4 years. And this came out of a bill that had been attempted to be passed on the House floor called Lee K. And Lee K, the issue we have with Lee K, it was just a very divisive bill and just would have not helped really give equitable funding across everybody, everybody's communication mode and everything. It was very one-sided. So through that whole thing, even though it was a little dicey, because the deaf community can be dicey, I know it, I'm dicey sometimes. We look at this and we were able to create a collaborative stakeholder group where we were able to get together and start trying, okay, we know there's problems in the system, so how are we gonna move forward together versus fight each other, rip each other apart? So this is how this came to be, but basically she's scrolling, you check off boxes. Everything refers back to IDEA, federal IDEA, and Alabama code, both. So that's where we got input from some of our friends who are attorneys and non-attorneys, special education advocates, both. So one of the things that we're thinking about doing, discussion is right now, as you see, there's a lot of references. We're keep some of the references, but there's a lot of directions. So the ask has been, can you pull out the parts that we need and create an instruction booklet with it? So that's where they are in the process right now with the communication plan in terms of simplifying it and all that. So that's a little bit of the history on the communication plan from stakeholders group. So any questions on that? I'm just curious. Yeah. Other stakeholders? The stakeholders for the communication plan, you mean? Okay. The stakeholders that were a part of the communication plan are Julie Beth Jones herself. AIDB was one of them. Alabama Hands and Voices, which is another big deaf organization. My mother and I, which is the Center for Advancement of Next Gen Deaf. And we also had individual stakeholders. Well, I need to go back to the original document just because there was a lot of confusion, or there's just a lot of words on it. We did remove some of the signatures off of at the bottom just because all the stakeholders requested it. But I can confirm with Maria, but I believe we also had Deborah, and her name is slipping from me right now, but we also did have a former State Department education person who retired, and her specialty was hard of hearing. I'm really great with faces. I just have to see names visually to remember, but that is in terms of the in-depthness of the stakeholders that we have. So the stakeholders that we have for our project are Andy Hill, Julie Beth Jones, Marie Katz. We finally have heard back from a previous PIPA graduate, Christy Cumberland, and she is going to be helping us with her expertise as well. So we're really excited to have her on board. Christy, yeah. Okay, yes. So that's who we'll be working with, and we'll be pulling other people in as well on the table. So. I don't know. Okay. All right. So this is to our why. So y'all have heard us view a little bit of information, I know, but really the why is that we're so passionate about is early language acquisition. We know there's research, especially research on that, you know, a child, especially a child who has hearing loss, there's a need for early acquisition. This can apply for other disabilities as well. If you don't have resources to be able to access your language, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, whatever you need, because language is the foundation of a lot of things. We know this from psychology, that the language and communication is the foundation of relationships, healthy development for children, and everything across the whole spectrum. And so this is just the first 2 bullet points is basically referencing, and I have all the references on our very last PowerPoint of just some research I could pull up just generally. but I did try to attempt to look at research articles that were more recent, because one of the biggest things that we typically see with our deaf community and culture both is there's a lot of debate on who's right and who's wrong. And sometimes it's a lot of very older studies that are very well done. And there's also new studies that are very well done, but there's a lot of devices. So I focused more on the topic of what is best for all of us. And the data still shows and agrees that there still is a positive correlation between language deprivation and illiteracy leading to poor mental health and socioeconomic outcomes for deaf, hard of hearing individuals. And I like to talk about this. So Gallaudet University in 2018 released a statistic that at the best deaf residential school, the average grade reading level is 7th grade. And most people don't realize that you have to have a 10th grade reading level for effective access to healthcare. So even we don't know what's going on, what we're seeing is if we have a child who doesn't receive services early and does have a chance to actually be able to form language, whether it's visual language or it's spoken language, the closing the gap is harder. And then add closing the gap to literacy as well, because we know we need literacy to access jobs and access a lot of things too. So that's the data, a little bit onto why we're trying to use the communication plan, different stuff in terms of tying back to Alabama's literacy law that they created, because it is very much a big area that's really important as well. So then the second point is the narrative has still not changed 30 years later. When I was diagnosed and my parents realized I was deaf, they figured out I was deaf at 6 months old. And it was not diagnosed properly till 9 months. And actually was not correctly diagnosed till I was 1.5 years old. And that's a whole long story. But the important part of the story that I like to share about my story is when we started going through the early intervention system, because we didn't have any documents and everything, and my mom to a deaf child, I'm her first child. So she's now trying to figure out what is it like in the deaf culture and deaf community? What is it like when my child has a disability, and how I am going to give her the resources that she needs and everything as well. And we were actually denied resources. And that's a longer story as well. But if we had had a communication plan, if we had better guidance on different stuff and resources, and either I was at early intervention at the time, the plan is the communication plan will have a version for early intervention, but we're trying to focus on education right now. So by the time that we got into transition services and I was entering school, even though it was very clear that my communication mode was listening and spoken language with auditory verbal principles, which is the way of speaking English. And it's very specific because it requires a specific methodology and type of therapy. Just as like for a child who's autistic, you're not gonna say this child gets behavioral therapy. You want to be more specific that it's ABA therapy because there's a difference. So that's one of the things that communication plan highlights. And this is something I'm still seeing as an advocate in my school districts, that I have to constantly educate school systems on what does communication modes mean and what does language mean for a deaf hard hearing child sometimes. So if we had communication plan out there, plus improved guidance, everything, we would hope that the narrative is much better today. And, you know, for me, I'm 30 years old. We're still seeing the same thing. And Emily also.
Yes. So Jess's mom actually helped me with my son because he was denied access to early intervention and then into the school system as well. So the same issues that Jess's mom fought for her and her siblings 30 years ago, still happening today. So I had similar struggles with my son, and now we're both acting as advocates. She's through her nonprofit, and I work with Alabama Hands and Voices, still seeing issues with children getting the resources and the therapies and the services that they need to access their education. And so, you know, it's kind of infuriating to feel like this fight's been going on this long. So. Oh, he is helping.
You go ahead.
All right, we're good. Oh,
You got it?
there we go. So project timeline, just briefly, we plan to coordinate meetings with the Special Education Advisory Council, Government Office on Disabilities, someone with the State Board of Education to talk to them about what our proposal is to get an updated compliance verification form for identifying children with hearing impairment and deafblind. And then trying to get that communication plan made part of the Alabama IEP, sort of like autism did with their behavior therapy stuff. We're kind of trying to use similar things that they did to make that so that when they pull up the IEP, if the child is identified with a hearing impairment, the communication plan automatically pulls up too. Right now it's a voluntary thing. And then just to get some clarify the information in Mastering the Maze, or really add information, because there's nothing there right now. So it just says, if you check this special factor, address it, and that's it. And you saw the 7-page form is how you're supposed to address it, but it's one comment on Mastering the Maze right now. Anyway, so hopefully by next spring, we will have put that into use in the state. So anyway, goal by the spring of 2024, we would like to see compliance with the use of the CVM, with the use of the communication plan, and then into the future a little more, have some literacy scores to show that this is helping children, that using, getting them the proper accommodations and supports, that we're seeing improved literacy. As a side note, my son is part of a longitudinal study with hearing loss, spoken language, children using spoken language with hearing loss, and literacy outcomes through the National Institutes of Health and USC and TCU. So he's been in this study since he was 3, I think. So we going out to Dallas for the next part of it. Anyway, so there's a lot of research going on with that right now.
So clearly, our project is, we're really starting our project. We already have the communication plan. We are currently finishing the CVF forms right now. We've just been waiting for some of our stakeholders to get back to us. Chrissy's been traveling a lot, so we're waiting to hear from her, and then just some other things as well. So the reason that we have our meeting set more for fall, we're hoping by fall. If it happens earlier, great. We'd love to meet them earlier, but we're trying to make sure that we have everything done before we move forward with that. So that's really what we have in terms of work in progress. And then we'll see what lessons we learn. All right. Any questions? And like I said, here's the references on the next thing. Here are the references if you guys want to go back and look at any of them. But any questions?
I assume y'all have put a backstop in on filling out those forms, like in the IEP, whenever they identify the disability of, as long as one of the disabilities identified as deaf or hard of hearing, even if they choose like multiple disabilities as the overriding factor for the IEP. Personally, I've seen school districts to use the classification of multiple disabilities to actually hide behind by not providing services. So putting them under multiple disability, and then you might have a child that has autism, like, or for example, my son, and then refusing to provide the direct autism services because it's classified under multiple disability. I was just wondering, like, I assume that there's a backstop in there for that, but.
So I understand exactly what you're asking. That is something that the same stakeholder group had a private meeting back in when did Cheryl lecture? Anyways, we have one of the best deaf educators, and her name is Cheryl D. Johnson, and she came, she actually worked with the National Association of State Directors. And there's something we'd like to reference as the Purple Book, which is the recommendations. Anyways, we had a private meeting with her, I want to say it was in February. And we sat down, we talked about that exactly. The reason that we're trying to push the communication plan first with hearing impairment and deaf blindness as well, is because we know we have to start small with our ask to convince the State Department of Education first, at least to us, that this is an important document. It can absolutely be expanded with other disabilities. And you are right that people are intentionally classified. So the school does not provide different stuff. But what we have found in the school districts, what we've been using the communication plan with, it actually drives and the parent ends up winning, getting the child appropriately classified a bit more because they can't ignore federal IDA. So that's the goal. And that is a topic that we still have. And that's something we are still trying to figure out together because we also understand it could fall under speech and language impairment as well, classification, which we get that a lot as well. Yeah, which other one?
Yeah. Children get mislabeled all the time with hearing impairment as either speech language impairment or developmental disability. And then they ignore the special considerations. And if you look at the court cases, they're going to lose in court if they don't take those special considerations into account. So, yeah.
It depends. But yeah, so I do understand concern. I would love to see it expand to all other disabilities as well, because everybody needs communication and language. We just have to give our ask first for specifically hearing loss, because the communication plan is written for hearing loss, but I need to double check. But I believe in Colorado and North Carolina, they both had some of the best communication plans, but they did it for hearing impairment and deaf blindness. And what came through that is, especially North Carolina, they took the hearing impairment communication plan and made a general one that helped cover for other disabilities as well. So that's what we kind of have seen in general. When one state does something for a certain disability, it kind of trickles down eventually. So that's something I would love to pursue more with my nonprofit down the road after we do our PIPA project, is to really, if we can get the communication plan rolling out, how does that look for other disabilities as well to support them and their language needs? Because there are special considerations under the law, but I would have to work with an attorney to really understand how could the communication plan be modified, because technically with special considerations, it is specifically for deaf and hard of hearing children. That specific part, and that's the part that the communication plan really drives on, is that part of the law. The part of the communication plan that could be used is for assistive technologies, because we cover both. So I have had some people and some families who have asked for the document or refer them to Hands and Voices website because they needed assistive technology for their child. And they've been able to pull bits and pieces and kind of made their own communication plan to get the supports that they need, such as a telecommunication device or in some cases hearing aids, because the child has multiple disabilities, but they still need hearing aids in order to access sound for them and their language if the child's goal is to try to have some speech and everything as well. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So.
There's a comment from online Kim Spangler. OHI and multiple disabilities are frequently used to pass over a specific diagnosis. And a follow-up question, honest thoughts on the movie Coda. What is the best way to help advocate for people who are deaf as a hearing person?
So, great question. Because, so let me rephrase the question, I'll make sure I heard you right. So, because of everything that happened with COVID, how to advocate, so I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Oh, what are your honest thoughts on the movie Coda?
Okay, I thought I was about to read the captions.
Let's see
So
if I can.
Yes, I have. Okay, yes, I have seen the movie Coda, my bad. I actually love Coda. So I am deaf. I wear bilateral implants to hear. I sign a little bit, but I'm not fluent. So with Coda, it's very fascinating to me because that is a big reality. And actually one of my best friends in Texas calls herself a Coda, but she's also deaf. She's born to 2 deaf parents, and dad is culturally deaf. Mom had progressive hearing loss later. And they made the decision to bilateral cochlear implant her when she was young. They were actually forced out of the deaf community because of their choice. And that's something that people don't realize is a lot of the division. It's a very big reality, but she will proudly call herself Coda. And I remember watching it and calling her afterwards. And she said, you know, that made me cry because, you know, I'm a deaf person. And all the time we ask for my dad to have an ASL interpreter for all his medical appointments. And I get there to be with him because I already know I'm the medical interpreter. And so that is really what breaks my heart and drives my passion, even though I am oral deaf and a lot of people don't agree with me and the choice that I made. I'm here for all of us, and Emily is too. And one of the things that's why we're passionate about our project, because our project really shows the whole diversity of our deaf and hard of hearing community. Because I'm a big believer, nothing about us without all of us, like Ms. Sawyer said yesterday, because this is true. And so I really love the movie Coda just because it really reconciled with the realities. So for me as a deaf person, you do need to listen to us. And if we tell you we need something, you need to meet our needs. And I think that's one of the big themes with Coda as well is, especially when you're a native ASL user and American Sign Language is your language and you are culturally big D deaf, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of marginalization, a lot of disproportionality, especially. So taking a step back and actually listening and actually seeing what they're saying, but you gotta follow through the actions. And that's the biggest thing we see. We have a lot of people talk, but we don't have a lot of follow through.
Any other questions? I have just a very brief question. This is Brooke. For the literacy assessments, are you recommending that those are done within the district, or are you recommending outside assessments?
And that's something we are trying to figure out as well. One of the assessments that has been strongly recommended is TASL. It's a really great one for reading and also for spoken language and also fluent ASL users as well. But we are trying to figure out what is best. And so we also have another person in our project. She's just simply, she didn't really want to be on our stakeholders, but she was willing to give us feedback. Her name is Marcy Cooker. She was previously a teacher in the special education system. So she's given us a lot of very valuable insight and knowledge because I do understand it's a lot to ask a general education teacher that already has a lot going on who will be performing the literacy assessment. So that is something that we are trying to figure out. And that's why we have not finalized the CVF forms yet, because we are trying to determine that. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Going once? Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Good morning. Today we'll be talking what's that? Oh, I'm Tina Dorius.
And I'm Brandon Crosby.
And today we'll be talking about our group project, which was Amplify and Advocate, creating a digital resource.
My project, HIPAA Class of 23 partners, Brandon Crosby and Tina Dory. When I was graduating high school, I decided to do a pamphlet as a resource guide for other special needs people like me and for everyone in the special needs community. It was a big hit, and I am really excited about getting to put it online now. Something that I've been wanting to do forever.
So I don't know how to take the space off. So when Brandon and I met at our first PIPA conference, we immediately hit it off. And one of the things we had in common was our passion for advocacy. And we had talked about our goals how we wanted to grow in advocacy. And Brandon had made specific goals about becoming more public in his advocacy and growing his advocacy. So when our project came up, it was just a really natural fit to turn the pamphlet that he had made in high school into a professional Facebook page. And so we got together, we had a few Zoom meetings, and we launched the page. We kept it kind of a secret because we wanted to announce it today. So if you guys could pull up your phones, look on Facebook and find Brandon Crosby, the advocate you can trust. And so our goal is for Brandon to use the page not only to advance his own advocacy and his own voice, but to model for other people with disabilities that they too should amplify their own voice, to give them confidence. Everything about his story is motivating and to encourage others to follow in his footsteps. So as we kind of see the theme of the weekend, this is a page for us and by us.
Not enough special needs people's voices are being heard. Our project's goal is to raise awareness and bring awareness to us. We're here, we're active, we're gathering trustworthy resources and sharing information.
So our timeline, we met in February for a kickoff meeting where we brainstormed ideas. We talked about kind of the structure of what we wanted to do. And Brandon, we came back together in April and we started hammering out the page. And we published the welcome message and shared the first resource. Brandon has already compiled 3 pages of resources, like typed resources that he wants to share. So our plan is for consistency and to build. We know we've got to put out regular posts. And so our plan is to once a week put out at least a post sharing a local resource.
And our goals for this amazing project are build community and fellowship for people with disabilities on Facebook, share one local resource or event per week to keep the community informed and aware, and most importantly, motivate and encourage others, individuals with disabilities to share their own voices as well.
So work still left to do. We want to promote the page amongst our network, keep up at least one post per week, and keep gathering relevant and up-to-date resources to share.
Lessons learned. We accomplish more together because we keep each other motivated and cheerful. Resources are constantly changing, and we must make sure we're sharing things that are effective and impactful. We hope to empower individuals with disabilities to trust their own experiences and use their voices to help others who are going through similar journeys.
Any questions?
Hi, this is Jennifer. Brandon, if we have information to share with you and Tina for posting on your site, what's the best way? Should we jump into the page and share something, or would you like for us to email you? How would you like to receive communications from us?
You can just email me or Tina and we'll get it posted for you.
And a little bit about our collaborative process. The page is Brandon's and it's his voice. So he shares with me, usually by text or email, what he wants to post. And then I just kind of pop it up there. And And I always double check with him. Is this correct? Is this what you want to say? And if it's not, he corrects me. And we get there eventually, right? But it's been a lovely endeavor. We've enjoyed every single minute of it. It hasn't felt like work to us. So it's just been a joy. And we look forward to staying connected with everybody through his page.
Perfect. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. My name is Christy Giles. My project is called A+ Hope. The name has been tossed around and changed a few times, but essentially A+ Hope means advocacy plus helping others by providing education. Originally, this was an endeavor I was going to do on my own, and over the course of the last few months, I've had 3 other people step in and say, hey, we want to help do this. We have a passion for advocating. What can we do? So my project is to help provide education to parents, caregivers, or persons with disabilities on how to self-advocate or how to advocate for their children. Whether that's knowing resources involved or having, just the knowledge that we need to help advocate for our children and our family members. So with who, Heather Dantzler, she is not a part of our PIPA group. She is my best friend. She has a major in psychology with a master's in early elementary education. She currently teaches pre-K, but has a very big heart for helping advocate for younger children getting early intervention services because she deals with that a lot. So she's one of my with who. I currently have 2 other people interested in helping. Madison Odom and Dr. Sarah Odom. They are both parents and grandparents of children with autism, and they have over the last 6 months had to fight really hard, and her children are only 3. So they have started that advocating process very young and early. So they want to help spread that as well. So my why. This is Sarah Beth. She is 17, full of sass, but she has Down syndrome, and she is my why. When she was in 1st grade, we were having some issues with our special education teacher not following the IEP and doing what needed to be done. We live in a very rural area. Washington County is one of the lowest income counties in the state. We're one of the largest counties in the state, but we service 8 schools in the state. I mean, so we have no resources. We're very poor, and I didn't know what to do. And there happened to be another teacher there who'd had to do the same thing I was fixing to have to do, advocate. And she reached out, risked her job, because, as a teacher, you have to be very careful what you tell parents. And she told me what I needed to do. She led me to ADAP. ADAP led me to an attorney. And from there, it just kind of took off. And so, that's my why. I want to do the same thing for other people. You should never not know what you need to do. You should always have somebody have your back. And that's what I want to provide for other people, is that support that I feel like I never had, with Sarah Beth. So my project timeline, in March, I threw out some topics on Facebook. What does people want to hear about? And so I posted like IEP breakdown, post-high school services, early intervention, ARI, which is the Alabama Reading Initiative, law, IDEA, ADA, transition services, just a whole array of things, topics. What would people in my community like to know more about? And so everybody was like, all of it. We want to know more about all of it because we don't know things about this. So my goal is to have a seminar in August, the first Saturday in August, which I think is August the 5th. And I want to discuss 4 different, domains of, disabilities. And that's right there. So my first goal is to educate parents, caregivers. The second goal is to host 4 seminars a year to educate parents and caregivers and talk about the 4 different domains: birth to 5, K-12, the law, and then post-high school. And I would love to do it in a manner that is like any other conference you would attend. You know the schedule, you look and go, oh, I don't need to go to the 8 o'clock because I don't need birth to 5. Let me just go to the 10 o'clock because it's K-12. That's what I need to hear about. And you know the topic that's being talked about that day as well. I want to get speakers that are knowledgeable in these areas. I know to start with, it's probably going to be a little more low key. It's not going to be built up to what I want, which is fine. I have to remember small steps. So, I really want to educate people. They just don't know. And in my job as a behavior analyst, I do advocating as much as I do behavior therapy, because so many times my parents look at me and they go, what am I supposed to do about school? And I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation. You know, this is something I can help you with. And so the more I do it, the more God confirms, this is what you need to do. This is something else you need to work on. And so he has continued to bring people in my life that's pushed me to go that direction. You guys are some of those people, you know. So, you know, I'm going to go back to my timeline. I still have, you know, I have the location now. We're going to do it at my church because it is central to the town that we live in. It's large enough to host it. I don't want the school involved. Like, to me, that's something parents need to feel that they can trust, you know, the people that they're talking to. So I want to keep it out of the school district. If I have speakers that are affiliated with the school, I want them speakers that come from somewhere else. I don't want our local school district involved, because that's going to not help parents feel comfortable. If I was back then, if I would have had to have went and sat in a room and asked questions with my daughter's teacher sitting 2 rows behind me, I'd have never opened my mouth. So I want there to be confidentiality. I want them to know they can come and have this place of refuge, basically rest. And so I'm still working on my speakers. Some of you may hear from me in the future on, hey, would you like to come speak? So right now I'm trying to keep it, you know, people that are in our area going to talk about early intervention services and things like that, just to start. And eventually I'm hoping to pull in people like Jess and Emily and others from around our state that can help bring in more information, because we have all these issues within our county, but people don't know about them. Sending out flyers, confirming speakers, and then of course in August hosting the event. I will be a nervous wreck by then, but hey, it's okay. So that is what I still have left to do. The nonprofit is the A+ Hope. Dr. Sarah Odom has actually agreed to take on that, which took a huge burden off of me, because when I was looking into it, I was like, oh, this is too much. I can't do this by myself. And so she's like, we're going to create the nonprofit for you. I was like, oh, thank you so much. As long as I can do the part that I want to do, I don't care what you do with that part of things. So she's the one who added A+, because originally the title was Hope. And she was like, well, can we do something a little different? And I was like, I don't care. You know, this is what I want to do. And I don't care what the name is. I just want to be able to do this. And so she added the A+ to it, which I really liked. So it kind of lets us encompass everything, not just disabilities, but education things just for typical children as well. And then writing grants to help cover the costs, because, you know, things cost money nowadays. Lesson learned. Anybody can advocate for their child. You just have to be willing to learn and apply what you have learned. And the second thing is that I am not alone. You know, that is one thing Pippa has taught me, is that all of us in this group feel the same way. Every parent that comes to my office feels the same way. We're not alone in this. And my new favorite quote is Dr. Seuss. And it's, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And that's the truth of it. You know, like Dustin kept saying last night, we have to change people's hearts. And unless we care enough to do that, it's not going to change anything. So, questions? No?
Any questions?
It is the county north of Mobile, yes. We are very rural. Chatham is the county seat. And to tell you how small we are, Chatham has less than 2,000 people in the city limits. I mean, so that's how tiny we are. We currently host 8 schools across the county, and education resources are very thin because of it.
Hey, this is Jess here. I'm super excited for you. I also love the wordplay as well of 8+Hope. My question is, so you were saying something about you're trying to create the first event being more local, which makes sense and everything. So you did mention you're trying to get other school districts involved.
Mhm.
So what are you looking for? Like what type of roles from those school districts? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
So what I would really like to do is bring in people that can break down IEP processes and early intervention services and different services that the school districts should offer, but maybe don't offer. And so I really, coordinators from different districts that are doing it, I'm going to say this the right way, because there are some school districts out there that have got it. They're doing it the way it needs to be done. So encompassing those people that are already pushing and advocating, that maybe could help our school district learn to do the same thing. Eventually I would love to take it. So I call us the Tri-County. It's Clark, Choctaw, and Washington. We're all kind of in the same boat, very rural, limited access. So eventually I would love to expand to do the Tri-County area. And eventually over the years, I would love to push it out to more, rural areas. So just starting small though, and saying if I could keep it in my community, then at least I'm making progress somewhere, but eventually with the hope of expanding. So. Anybody else?
Allison, did you have a question? Hold on.
Gotta have the microphone.
Do you have any plans after you meet with your community members and have this conference to give any valuable information back to the school district on things that they can work on? So to create more of a,
To kind of bridge that gap.
yeah, to bridge that gap, because I think that what I see all the time is, and what I've learned, at least in my experience, is that if you don't bridge that gap, then it's just like 2 divorced parents fighting each other and the child's in the middle.
Right. So the special ed coordinator and myself are actually friends, which is great. Her daughter dances with my daughter. They're in the same grade. So we've kind of have, that I already text her all the time when I learn new things here. And I'm like, hey, you need to be implementing this. I just thought you should know. So she's used to getting stuff like that from me. But yes, I do have plans to where after each conference, feedback from the parents and things like that, where I would love to sit down with her and go, this is where you need to fix things. And she's trying, but her hands are tied. And so when the parents start advocating, her hands will become untied a little better. And I think she'll be able to make some headway. So when I mentioned it to her that I was wanting to do this, she was like, oh, please do. We need it. We need more help. We're not getting enough. And I'm a former special education teacher. And that was one of the biggest things I always told my parents is unless you go to the board from the top, there's nothing I can do. I need you to untie my hands, because until you do that, I'm going to do my best, but there's still certain things that are unavailable to me because they're not given to me. So I need you to go here so we can get that for your kid. And she kind of feels the same way. So I'm hoping she'll stay our coordinator for a while. She's very young, but we will see. I would really like to get the superintendent on board with a lot of stuff, but that's a whole nother thing. So thank you so much.
Any other questions? Oh,
Hi, when you say your hands are tied, what specifically are you talking about?
So in the special education world, teachers cannot do anything that the school district does not approve first. And normally that's because of funding issues. We can never look at a parent and say, hey, I can't afford to, because legally that is a big no-no. So I always told my parents my hands are tied, and they always knew that was, hey, we need some money, somewhere. And that's a lot of it is our funds supporting so many schools limits our fund per school. It's huge that curriculum, there was a certain curriculum I needed for a certain child and it was not very expensive. And when I say not expensive, I mean in the hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. And the answer was no, because we can't afford to spend that extra $500 or $600 on curriculum for one kid. And so when I say hands tied, that's always what I'm talking about, is the financial aspect of things, because there are so many things that teachers and even special ed coordinators cannot accomplish because the money's not there. And until parents, and we can't say, I can now because I'm not a teacher, but teachers and they can't say that, because if they say that, then they've opened themselves up for a lawsuit. And Nancy and James can totally go on board with that. The first time they told me we can't afford to hire a behavior analyst for your child, I said, oh, but now you will. Like now you will, because you just opened the door for, a big lawsuit. And so that's what it is. It's just funding. And that's a statewide problem. It's not just a local problem for small rural areas. It's a problem for big areas as well. So.
Yeah, and we do appreciate your hard work on this. And one of the things that I think about when it comes to schools, schools are going to do what schools can do, and as also what they can get away with. And I say that because if you have something written in your plan, your IEP or ISP or whatever your plan is, that school has to provide that. And oftentimes I've been in this for 20-something years, and I know with the Lee County school system, in which I worked with several years before I came here, had a good relationship with a lot of the, the superintendents and assistant superintendents and school officials. But there was every so often there were things that was provided or should have been provided that they did not want to provide, and did everything that they could do to not provide. If it's in your plan for them to have a certain teacher or a certain task, and they don't provide it, they're legally bound to provide that. And since I've been with the council, James and Nancy can say that I've called them or since, referred people to them, more than once, because you cannot stop when the school says, oh yeah, we can't do this. If it's in your plan, they have to do that. And a lot of schools will do everything that they can to get away with it. Prime example, several years ago, of course, one of the programs that I was over was a transitional living program. And we had 14 youth and probably 12 of those were in the public school system. And I had a meeting with one of the superintendents at one point in which, all your kids need to be over there, so to speak. And that was an on-ground school, and I fought it. And during the time of my tenure there, the graduation rate increased from probably 30% to about 96, 97%, because you weren't going to tell me that my kids had to go to school, had to be bound in, in a particular school, when the kids in the school system were doing the same thing that some of our kids were doing in the program. And our kids were some of the smartest kids, so you have to fight. So I do appreciate, what you've done. And James would say, I have called, hey, James, hey, I got a Nancy, we got this situation. Can you,
Yep.
And they send them to me there, so we got to do that. And that's why it's so important for us all to make the connection, even in this group. We make the connection in here. If something that you cannot do, something that you're running into problems with, chances are somebody else has been to the same problem. So tapping into, each one of our agencies are unique, and we really depend on each other, because some things James sent me, some things Linda sent me, and some things I sent to them, because that's what it's all about. I can't do James' job. James can't do my job. So we kind of work together. So that's that. And you all got some great projects, and I do appreciate that.
And I promise I don't want to do Daryl's job. I'm not qualified. I do want to make a couple of comments, though. I want to expand the conversation about the lack of funding beyond education. And I want to make a couple of points. Everything that we've discussed this morning, everything that you discussed is absolutely accurate and on point. And if there's an expert in the state, if there's an expert in the room at making education supports work, it is Nancy. I'll come back to that a little bit, but I want to make a couple of points. Fundamentally, if a person has a right, the lack of money is not an excuse for failing to comply with that right. Education, housing, Medicaid waivers, mental health, certain transportation, all of it. If you have a right, the courts say that lack of funding is no excuse. That's a lot of ADAP's work. I want to make a couple of related points. That being said, if you don't have an enforceable right, then there are other ways to advocate. And many of you are doing that work, and we want to be your partner. All members of the DD network want to be your partner. But as an example, if you don't have an enforceable right, lawyers may not be able to use the tool of going to court to enforce that right, which means there has to be a different advocacy avenue. I want to make a couple of distinctions and give a couple of examples because I was reading something literally in the last 24 hours. Some people have heard me tell the first part of this story. In the 1950s, when there was an attempt to enforce equal access by race to recreation opportunities in the city of Montgomery, the city of Montgomery closed its public swimming pools. There is not an enforceable right to recreation if the service is not offered. However, to use the example of the city of Montgomery again, many people know the story of Rosa Parks. The city kept running buses, but they did that in a discriminatory way. That's why the Rosa Parks case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and you've not heard much about swimming pools. I want to jump to this moment. Some of you may have seen the headline. This week, the state of Missouri legislature decided to stop funding public libraries in the state. You may have read about it. You can imagine all kinds of public debates that are going on, current cultural issues. We don't have a right to a public library. So I want to come back and kind of close the loop. Whenever you're advocating for something and you hear, sorry, we don't have the money, there are kind of two ways it can go. And education is a great example. In the state of Alabama, under state law and under federal law, students have a right to a range of educational supports and services. And if any one of the well more than 100 school systems in the state says, sorry, we can't hire that teacher, we can't provide that support, we can't provide that service, please call us, we want to help. What we will do whenever you hear, sorry, we don't have money, is we will try to sort through with you whether there's a right that we can enforce or whether we need a different advocacy strategy. And again, it's not just education. Alabama is a poor state. You could double property taxes in Alabama, they'd be the lowest in the country. We are a poor state, but lack of money is no excuse for failing to comply with enforceable rights. I just wanted to share a few thoughts. Thanks.
Hey, good morning, Christy.
Hey.
I've been to Washington County a few times, so I appreciate the challenges that your rural community faces and the
Well, I hope you come back because I'm gonna like try to get you down there as a speaker.
anytime. I travel through it regularly on my way to Mobile. I think your idea about bringing in people, special education specialists and so on, to talk to your families is a good one. Of course, every special ed coordinator is going to say that they're legally compliant. But I think you'll find some who can really speak to best practices that they might use. And so I'll give you an example. I was at a local IEP meeting where the coordinator, and of course they should do this. Some don't, some do it in a half-assed kind of way. But she sat down and she said, let's go through these evaluation results. Let's go through and see what the WISC, I think at the time it was the WISC 3. What are these WISC 3 results? And she took what is very technical, psychometric, and translated it into language that the father, in this case, could understand and appreciate. And as she walked through each of those evaluation results, you could see his eyes opening, that he really understood the strengths child had, but also the challenges. And then it led to a much better discussion about how the IEP was going to address the challenges. That woman, to me, that day demonstrated a really strong best practice that unfortunately you don't see that often. So I hope in your efforts, you're able to uncover those best practices that can enrich your school community.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Christy?
Good morning. I'm Mabel Crosby. I'm Brandon's mother. And I have kind of sat back quietly, but I wish 36 years ago that I had had an opportunity to be a part of something like this. Because when Brandon was born, I was told, take him home, Crippled Children's Services will pick him up. And there was nothing else that could be done, because at first they thought, oh, his left eye just wasn't there, which happens to 1 in 3 million children. It just something that happens. 6 months later, we realized that he couldn't sit up. He couldn't do anything. 3 months later, he started having pneumonia. He had it 13 times before they realized he couldn't swallow. Then they realized that the midsection of his brain wasn't there, and they said he'd never walk, he'd never talk, he'd never roll over. So they said, put him in an institution.
Don't you love it when they beat the odds?
Oh, yes. And they said, that take him, you should put him in an institution, because at that time I was a single parent. And they said, you will never be able to care for him. This child will never do anything, and you don't have the ability to care for him. But they did not know the God that I served. And they did not know that although I didn't know what to do, I knew that I could do something. I didn't have any help, but I did know that I could go somewhere. So I went first to the eye doctor in Birmingham to take care of what I could see that he needed help with. And that was getting something in his eye so that his face could develop properly. So what I began to do was one step at a time. But IEPs were so important as we went along, because by age 4, Brandon began to try to walk. So by age 4 was the first time 4-year-olds were able to come into the school system in Talladega County. So because I was teaching, he was able to be the first 4-year-old to come into the system, because I got in the year that they announced it. So the next year they were going to let the children in. So Brandon got to come in first. He was the first 4-year-old to ever enter Talladega County school system in the Child Development Center at that time, because we didn't know that he'd be able to go to an actual kindergarten or first grade, which the next year he was able to go. So IEPs became something that I just began to learn what Brandon could have, what could be made available to him. And the first thing I had to fight before that was Medicare. He didn't fit. He had one eye, but he was not blind. He couldn't walk, but he did not have cerebral palsy. There was no box that I could check. So I had to fight to get any money to help me raise him, because there was no box on an application that I could check. So I hope those things are being addressed here 36 years later. But IEPs are wonderful, but you have to fight when you sit down for an IEP. The first paper he brought home, he couldn't do any of the work because it was 4 things on one sheet. But when you put one thing on a sheet, he could do it. He couldn't line everything up, so we had to use graph paper so he could put things in a block. Little things that may not mean anything to other people, sitting at the front of the class, having his own aid because he didn't have the coordination to swallow properly. So if he choked, he didn't make any noise. He just went. Well, if his aide was sitting beside him, she didn't know he was choking. So he had to have an aide that had to hire an aide to sit in front of him. Well, I had to fight for that aide, but IEPs are so important. Talladega is a small area. If we had had what you are offering now, it would have been an answer to a prayer, because I was at that time, I was very poor. I didn't have anything, but I had the fight in me. I see that fight in you, and I see that fight in all of you. So I commend you all. And if I can do anything to help any of you, because through the grace of God, I'm not poor anymore. And you see what God can do. You see Brandon. Now he is his own advocate. I fought for him for so long, but there are still so many things. And I saw one of your things was post-education. When he graduated from high school, there was this big question, what now? Where does why don't we have an individual life plan for our children? Because that's our biggest problem as a parent. What happens if something happens to us? So why can't our children have an individual life plan? The education plan is great, but what happens after 12th grade? So there's still so many things that we can do. But
Sounds
thank
like
you.
we maybe have a new PIPA member for next year.
Hey, I would love it.
Well, and now we all get the joy of being friends with Brandon.
Yes.
And can encourage him on his motivational speaking journey that he'll take.
Okay, I'm Sharon Henderson.
I'm Mi-kyung Kim.
And I am Maria Gutierrez.
Okay, well, our project is on transition. We are parents where our children are either at that point or have crossed over. So transition for us is something we want to leave as a way to pull the puzzle pieces together. We wanted to provide a way for parents coming behind us, because transition comes up quick. It doesn't seem like it when you're going through all the IEP meetings and you're dealing with medical issues and all the things, the daily things that you're dealing with your child, and you don't, you hear the word transition, but you're like, oh, that's still a few miles down the road. But then you look up and you're there. And it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So from parents to other parents, we're going to provide a brochure that brings everything together. So transition can be one of the most frustrating times, one of the scariest times, most confusing times. Like, where do we start? How do we get all of this together? What am I going to do with my child? We've heard several people talking about the life plan. What is going to happen when my kid graduates high school? They can stay in till they're 21 if that's their choice. But are there other options? So this brochure that we want to put together is going to give you that information. Where to start, when to start, how to start looking, helping your child to dream when they're little, just like a typical child. When they're teenagers, oh, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Sky's the limit. So we're not going to limit our kids' because people say they have a disability. Everybody's got an ability. So we're going to work on what their ability is. Okay, so developing your plan. Where do you want to start? Great place to start is one of our speakers we had here during the course of PIPA, Full Life Ahead. Great place to start. A weekend retreat getaway, giving you the ideas of how to help your child dream, where do we want to go? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to go to work? What do you want to do? Do you want to stay at home and play video games and just be a part of your community? How are we going to make this work? Building a dream team is a fantastic way to start. You can build those team members within your family, your church, within your school, within your community to help them process, bring all of this stuff together so that they are dreaming about the life that they want to live within their community, within their school, help them reach those goals.
So she explained why we did this project. Personally, my daughter is 18 and we moved down from Minnesota 3 years ago. And after 6 months, we had the pandemic. And then before that time, I was not really involved in anything about, education. I thought, before I ask anything, they just provide it. And then I don't know if that was the best or not, but better than here. Anyway, and then I never heard about transition, about this kind of thing, I didn't have any concept about it because school did. And then I felt like, oh, she will graduate soon. And I felt like I have to do something. And then I, attended some Zoom meeting. And after that, in some way I could go to a Full Life Ahead, and I heard many other things. And then, yeah, I have to do a lot of things. And the school never provided anything about these, things. I just heard some resources from here and there, and then not really organized. So I felt like, oh, if there is something that, really organized in many areas, covers many areas, and then, give the parents, then it'll be really great. So that's why we started this projection. So we covered, higher education, employment, medical and legal, recreation, and housing and transportation that we can find in Lee County. We live in Lee County, and then we just give the information to school, so the school, coordinator, special education coordinator can give to the parents. So can you go to the next slide? So we just gather some information as much as we can. And after that, we felt like, families need to be connected to, like school or, some government, agencies and private organizations. So we gather the information in that. So firstly, we, like divide some areas we want to cover. And then after that, we, find some places and then made the brochure. So the next page, that's the brochure we made. And then Maria will explain about the brochure.
So one of the things that I found very hard when we moved to Alabama, it was trying to locate resources for our family. The first place that I contacted was CRS, and they told me we do not serve autism. Then I called Auburn University because I Googled it and there appeared the autism center. So I went like, cha-ching, we're fine. The center had been closed, but the information was still on the website. So as you could see, was very difficult to navigate how to find those services that we were having access in California. Where, first of all, I didn't have to be researching. I was assigned a case manager, and that was the person that gave me the menu for me to go and look. Came here, and I was digging and trying to find out, just like Miss Kim and Miss Henderson that moved from other places. So I went to the school system and said, and I asked, where do I start? Because back home, it was the special ed teacher, the special ed coordinator. The system itself provided that education for the parents, the list of resources that I could start tapping into. Here, it is our hope and our dream that this list might help our local school system to give it to the parents, because parents need to learn early on. We're focusing on transition. When we moved here, my son was still younger than 16. And when I mentioned transition, they said, oh, we do not start addressing transitions until they are on the 11th grade. And I was like, wait a minute. We were doing transition services and my son was in 6th grade. Because it is my understanding that the law says that if it is required early, we could start. So it is our hope that this list could be shared with the parents that are coming into the school system, for parents to start looking. Our philosophy is that give the information to the parents, let them decide, right? Because not every family might want to have an agency be involved in the transition process yet, right? But if the families don't have that information, how do they know? How do you know that there is cake somewhere if they don't give you a menu and you see the cake in the menu? So we gather a list of agencies and organizations across our county. That's what you guys have. We are aware that there's many more that we might not even know that exist, right? We want this to be a living document. It's not there yet, okay? So we still have a lot of work to do. But we try to break it down into what we feel is essential that parents are aware. You know, we think about employment, post-secondary education, housing. My son doesn't want to live with us for the rest of his life, and I don't want him in my house. So, but what kind of resources do we have in Alabama? So we're hoping that this will be something that we could start in our district, sending it to the special ed directors and try to disseminate it to all the schools so that the special ed teachers could give it to the parents and said, look, we have this information for you. We have lived that, and it has been hard to navigate and understand what we have in Alabama, what is available. So the goals: to reach out to the special education coordinators across the Lee County, to share this brochure, whether it is in person or via email, to the special coordinators across all the school districts. And also to share the brochure with other local agencies. We want them to have it available. But we want this to be a live document. So another goal that we have is to create a QR code where people, will share information, and we could start adding more services from other parts, right? From other agencies, from other entities. And people could have access just to, scan it. And this is a live document. We know that this is a big dream, but maybe it can be done. So what are some of the barriers that we see and that there still need work to do? First of all, we need the special educators to buy into it. that they see that this has value for the parents, right? Or the caregivers. And I think, and we think that it does. We would like to have a parent-to-parent transition brochure translated into Spanish and Korean. We were talking about access, right? Inclusion. And that it could serve a model for other counties across the state. Because the resources are out there, but they are not in one place. And they're not all the same. What, people have in Huntsville, we might not have it in Aber. So they are so diverse. So it was us. That's our contact information. Oh. That's our contact information. We are parents, right? But we're working also with agencies. I work for the Regional Autism Network at Auburn University. Our region itself covers 20 counties. I have probably only visited 4. We still have a lot of work to do. Ms. Henderson works for CRS. Ms. Kim is our Korean family navigator. So we want families to reach out to us. And we hope that people will find that this brochure is at least something that could be helpful at the beginning. Thank you. Questions?
Hi, it's Tina Dorius. I was just wondering, have you guys thought about partnering with your parent-teacher organizations? So I guess going straight to the PTOs and get it straight because it's parent to parent. So I thought maybe you guys want to go straight to the PTO as another way to make sure you just catch all those parents that can't be referred.
That is a great idea. And I think that a lot of the school systems, because they might not have a lot of representation or kids, identify with disabilities, they might not have a special needs parent on the PTO, but it's a great idea to reach out to the PTO, local PTO and see, if we could share this maybe. And sometimes the schools have resource fairs, but one of the main goals is that we could go and talk to the special ed coordinators and present it and said, what do you think? Because it's just a great information. But yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, this definitely, to do this, we really want to make this kind of a template so that, you can pull it up wherever it is, whether it's on Brandon's Facebook page or whether it's on the CRS website or on Rand's website where you can, there you go, well, Partners in Policy. So wherever this is that you can print it out, or you can go to it, include your local resources to give out, to print it out. This is easy access. Boom, boom. This should be able to go get into every parent's hands to say, so they can look at this and say, okay, now I've got an idea that you're planting some seeds. You're planting these seeds in parents' heads that they can, you know what, I saw something about that. Even if they don't hold on to it for long, they know they've seen it. They can go back to the website or go back to the person that originally gave it to it, print out another one. Let's start working on this.
Angela here. I have a question in harmony with Tina's comment. Another avenue to distribute your brochure would also be making it a part of registration packs when school opens. That way, parents who have children with disabilities get it at the point of registration, when school first opens versus having to discover it later.
That's great. That's very good.
I was just going to also, our local library is really good as a resource center. So don't overlook that as a place, the libraries throughout Lee County and your surrounding counties, because right when we walk in ours, we have like a community resource brochure rack. And so that would be a great opportunity to get the information out there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, I love your devotion to the topic of transition because it is, that's where the rubber is hitting the road.
as you well know. If you have any thoughts for Plan 2, for the energy that y'all have, there are some states that have a transition specialist teacher endorsement. So somebody at a school district who has the credentials and focus specifically just on transition issues. Alabama, as you can imagine, does not have that. There are many states that do have that transition endorsement. And I think it would be an advancement in how we address transition in the state. Massachusetts, well, nobody cares about Massachusetts here. Georgia, well, they don't. Georgia has an example of that transition endorsement. So once you get this on the road, ladies, there's step 2 for you.
Any more questions?
I was just gonna say, if you can get your web developer to host this PDF on the Auburn Regional Autism Network on their backend site to the PDF and send it to me, I'll put it up. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, are we ready to? No.
Thank you all. What great projects. Yeah. Great projects, great presentations. I haven't said this to the group, but I just want to know we will continue supporting you and following up with you, and we want to collect some data from your projects. So I'll send you another form just to kind of keep that in mind of what you're doing, who you're reaching out to, the numbers you're going to reach, and because we want to see the impact for partners. You know, we're doing all of this. It's this is a big project, but we want to see the impact, and those numbers will help us going forward, all of our programs. So keep that in mind as you're doing it. So when I ask you, it won't be like having to think way back for that. So keep that in mind. And Brooke's passing around the mileage. There was something else. I'll think about it after Daryl's.
Yeah, and I did want to echo what Linda has said. You all may not know Melissa Sylvester, who's in our council. She's one of the staff, and she's one of the data people. And she may hound you down in regards to what you're doing. Prior to me coming, she said, I need to know all of the graduates, because we report to the feds quite often. And I think I think where we are today is much more further than we were when I first came in. We have a lot of new federal people on the federal level that we report to, and they're really excited about what we're doing in Alabama. You know, with partners, they're glad that we have partners back. You know, of course, I'm in the meetings a lot, and not sure if we're going to do every year or how it's going to be, but we are making sure that everything that we do is reported, so that way they can know that we are making an impact. One of the things that was indicated early on, before we even brought partners back, was that the data it wasn't reported, I guess. And I know when partners were here years ago, I know it was an impact, because that's the reason why we have a lot of people now. But the data piece was not there. So in order for us to bring back, you know, this is what you need to think about. And as the network met, we talked about that. And we want to make sure that we capture it, because imagine if we have 18, 19, 20 graduates, how many people each one of those graduates are going to touch. So when you're going back to your communities, when you're going back to your counties, when you're going back, because a lot of this is great information. And one of the things that stands out is the resources. A lot of people do not know or not aware of how to tap into resources. Prior to when my mom had a stroke, and I know we got to take a break, but when my mom had a stroke back in 2015, I was in Lee County, and probably spent half of my life in Birmingham because that's where we were. So I'll leave Birmingham, UAB, go back to the office for a while, and go back to Birmingham. And some weeks I was in Birmingham 5 times a week. Some weeks I stayed, you know. So unfortunately at the time, my employer was working with me because I was on the road a lot. And I probably put, you know, 10,000 miles on my car in 1 week, certain weeks, because I wanted to make sure I was with my mom. But once she was discharged, what have you, over the time, James and I had communications, and some of the things that, you know, I didn't have a clue about. I worked in the system for 20-something years, but I did not know that, you know, I can get my mom home and have some of the same services that she was having when she was. So we started working on that, but before we can get down the road good, she passed. So even that alone, just the knowledge, if people are more aware that, hey, my mom or my dad or my relatives don't have to live in a nursing home, and get them home to get half of the resources and services that she can have at the facility, that would be huge. Because a lot of times people feel like, I can't do this. I can't financially, I can't do this. Physically, I can't do this. But if you got someone coming in to help you, to assist you, that will make the burden even lighter. So all of the information that you all have is great information. And I may have to leave a little bit early. You know, James and I was kind of talking a little bit yesterday how my weekends are. My wife reminded me this morning, you know, you got something to do at 3:30, so I got to be back at home. But so, and I do that because this is my passion. You know, when I left Lee County, my wife was like, you doing too much. And so my thing was, when I came here, I'm not going to work as much. But guess what? I find myself doing the same thing. I cannot get away from it. But, you know, that's just part of it, you know, because it's all about people, helping the people, you know, and my reward will come eventually. But, you know, I like to help people. So my weekends are busy, but it's a good thing. So I do appreciate all of that you all have done. If there's anything, you know, we do monthly e-newsletters. We can highlight your information in our newsletter, on our network, on our website. So all of that is good information that we can push for you. The more people that you have pushing for you, the better it is, the more people you're reaching. So I think our contact list at the council alone has reached, and I first came in, I think we had a contact list of 180. If you ask me now, when I reported to the feds maybe 3 weeks ago, I think we were like 819 contacts. So in a 3-year period, we've gone from under 200 to 800 and something. And it's probably more now, because when I went to DHR a couple of weeks ago, I think I added another, 30. So that's just to let you know that people are known. We're putting the word out. It's not hidden information. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. So anything that I could do, I'm here for you. We're all in this together, because what is the saying yesterday? Nothing about us without us. That speaks for itself. So I just wanted to kind of say that before, you know, we take a break.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. I wanted to take a minute and tell you all thank you. This was my first year with Pippa, so thank you for your patience with me as I learned. You will all always have a very special place in my heart. I'm not going to cry, but you know, like, keep talking and I'll cry. No worries. He knows me so well already. Each of you has such a powerful story and a powerful message to share. And I feel so honored to have met you all, to live and work with you all, and to count you all as friends and family. So thank you. Now, and thank you so much for our sweet cards. You're all so thoughtful. On behalf of all of us, Shanique and Latanya.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Shanique Jeffress. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Latanya Snow.
And our project is we are creating People's First Montgomery chapter. There has been a chapter before, but at this time there's not one. So we're creating one out of necessity. Okay, so People First is a statewide national program, and it's about it's for a group of people with developmental disabilities living in Alabama communities, dedicating to making their dreams happen and making their own choices over their own lives. And this means having the opportunities to make different decisions for themselves. So what the chapters do is that they have community meetings, legislative advocacy, and leadership and self-advocacy training. So we're wanting to create that. Okay. Okay, so I've already read that. You can go to the next one. And the next one. Okay, so we're going to talk about why we wanted to create this. We've heard the people before us talk about transitioning. So we're both at ages, have children at adult ages. So we want to talk about what's the next step after transitioning and why they're going through transitioning.
Hello, everyone. And she just stated that we are creating a People First program for our aging out young adults. And we have 2 young adults that are aging out of high school and young adult, well, high school and elementary school as well. They out, but after they get out of high school, they don't have a lot of opportunities. So we are trying to create these programs so that they will have somewhere to come and express themselves, enjoy themselves as young adults, to bring that young adult out in them or whatever gift God has for them. Because sometimes, everybody don't get to be doctors, lawyers, whatever, they may like music, they may like dance, they may like different things, and you have to pull those things out of the young adults. So we have to be creative, and it's just downhill after age of 18. And you don't want your child sitting at home couch, just sitting there watching or playing video games. And I know that there's something that they could be doing with their life. So that's what we are trying to create in our area in our community in Montgomery, because we don't have a People First, no resources, not many at all. So we want to make a difference there with our young adults.
Okay, I'll just add on to that. Yes, I have he turned 22 yesterday. So 22-year-old Jaden Miller, he's in college at Trenum Community College in Montgomery. So I want to help him be more a self-advocate for himself. So I wanted to, since this program is not in Montgomery, I wanted to create this program so he can learn the leadership skills and self-advocacy skills for himself and be more confident in what he's doing and be more confident to speak up for himself. So we wanted to have this chapter, and since there's already this program, we didn't have to create the wheel, just go on by what they already have planned out for us and get with other people in our area to do that. So our project timeline, and we have been talking to the different people of PIPA, People's First, Sonia Manny and Vicky Braysville, and also Jenny Lux that was here yesterday, about what we needed to do to restart the chapter in Montgomery. We're also working on a invitation letter, interest letter, and we have different programs that our children are a part of in Montgomery. So we're going to send that out to those programs. Like, it's one program that both of our children attend called STAR program, where they get life skills. They go on, They have parents date night where the parents can't attend, it's just all the children. So it's a lot of young adults in that program. And then there's also the Children's Center, and it's different places in Montgomery, Easter Seals, that we're gonna send the interest letter out to see who's interested and get that feedback. So we'll know how many people we have interested and get that going. And also, depending on who we have interested, we're gonna be looking for a location, depending on number, what size we need for a location to have a meeting, and just getting the location down and the time for our meeting. We can go to the next.
And our goals is to educate and provide programs to prepare youth and young adults with disabilities to be successful citizens in their communities, increase knowledge of resources and legislation and rights, and to empower and to provide supportive organizational leadership experiences and advocacy groups, and engages to facilitate support experiences for youth and adults with disabilities to find value actors and community activities and organizations.
Okay, like I said before, we're working on the interest letter, location, and setting up our first meeting. Next. We're still working out things, so we're sure we're gonna come across a lot of lessons that we'll learn along the way, but we're still working on that. Okay, any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Can you,
Is there any requirement that you like put together a local advisory council for a People First chapter or a board? Like what are the steps you have to do to get kicked off for that?
We're working on that, but I think we will have counselors and a board and things like that. We still working on that with the people that's cohorts with People's First. So we're still working on that, and like the if they'll have the president, vice president, we're working on all of that.
so just to clarify for someone who isn't aware of People's First chapters, each chapter has their own direct officers. That's the word I was looking for. Each
Yes.
one.
Yes.
Are either one of you interested in being an officer, or is it something that you get the self-advocates to do?
Yeah, we want to have the self-advocates in those positions, and we'll be like the advisors to that, but we want the people with disabilities to be in those positions.
Great. Any other questions? Any questions online? Hold on.
I can suggest I do a lot of parent advisory committee meetings. So I can offer this suggestion that looking at your local libraries for holding meetings. Anytime you're doing any community events, you want to always put that in there. It's open to the community. So where any place you're going to get that for free.
Okay.
So just let that know.
Okay, that's some
Thank you.
good information. I didn't think about that.
This is Maria. Along with that, the Chambers of Commerce, that could be also a great resource. Reaching out to see if the city, well, I know that Montgomery has a community center, and reaching out to those places where maybe, they could offer you, a room. And like Ms. Henderson said, putting posters all over there and sending flyers to organizations like the RAN, and we'll be happy to push it through the listserv.
Thank you for that information.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon. I'm Victor. I'd like for you to also consider the local leaders in your community, like your city council and your churches, your pastors. Sharing this with your church will be a good place to start with getting people from the community involved and getting them to connect with you. And also it's a good place to also bring in new members and additional members to help support your organization.
That's good information. Thank you.
Okay. Great job.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yvette Lockett, and I decided to do my my project rather on guardianships. And as you see, I put here that one size does not fit all. The reason that I chose that title is because I've gone through a personal journey with an adult child who I had at a point to get a guardianship for. And guardianships aren't necessarily for everybody. And I think that there needs to be serious consideration and thought before you, do a guardianship. My goal is to educate about the rights associated with guardianships and how they apply to each individual that is considering it. Okay, I'll give you a little bit about my journey with my son. My son was born at 1 pound, 10 ounces, was not expected to survive. So there have been many major surgeries and significant medical decisions that have had to be made throughout his life. I knew when he turned the age of 19 in Alabama, which is the age of majority. My son has intellectual and developmental disabilities. Because of his bleed at birth, I know that he does not fully understand some of this medical terminology that I may understand a little bit better than he does. So the guardianship in my case, in his father's case, was done initially to assist him so that we would be listened to. We learned early on that my son is very articulate, so he can hold a conversation and speak. So when a child, in my case, a doctor does not have to listen to you when a child is a majority age. They are going to do what that child wants to do. And I had very little say so. So, and that's why we went on, and decided to do what we did to be able to help him to make medical decisions, like I said initially, but then it turned into some other things with banking and some insurance issues. Kind of got ahead of myself, but I said some questions that I think that you may need to ask yourself. Does your adult child need a guardianship? And consider all of the factors involved. We each know our individual situations that we're dealing with. So consider your situation, what you will be getting it for, and what, good that you think it will do. What you can do to protect your loved one, because unfortunately, there are people, and I'll give you a prime example. My son has therapy. I had a therapist, and I actually called Mr. Tucker about this to try to get his advice. This happened about 2 months ago. I had a therapist to point blank tell me that my son was over 14 and she was not going to talk to me, period. She would talk to my son whenever she wanted to and continue to do so, to the point that I will not say her name, but I have had to report her to the board of which she is mandated by, because she chose to ignore my legal guardianship that was granted to me by the probate judge in Madison County. So I'm just saying that you may run into, which was, I was shocked. I will be very honest with you that she was brazen enough to say that to me, but she did. That is a real life thing that just happened to me a couple of months ago. So could your loved one still be able to make individual decisions? Okay, what I've learned through my research of just guardianships. I'm not going to read you everything that's on this slide, but what I would say is that you need to seriously sit down, consider it, think about there are some limitations to the person's, and I'm not going to say independence, because the goal, and I have not taken away my son's independence. He and I sit down and have conversations about every decision that is made. I do not alone in and of myself make decisions for him, because he does have a mind of his own. Though I do understand that he does not cognitively, some things he thinks he fully understands, I know that he does not. So, I try to be very hard to, explain those things to him and helping him to make decisions. Okay, within my project, I had spoken with Mr. Tucker, who has been gracious enough and very kind, because I know sometimes I probably drive him crazy with all my questions. So I do appreciate your patience. and explaining things to me in the way that you do, because he explained things I say in English and elementary. Not that he talks elementary, but I tell him to speak English so I can understand, because I'm a little slow sometimes. I'm not slow, but I just want to be able to understand it. And I'm not a lawyer by any stretch. So I just want to be, wanted to be able to understand some things. I went to a seminar that Karen McKelvey from Carney Law back in, it was put on by Full Life Ahead back in February. And their law firm spoke on guardianships as well as some other things. But she has been a resource, and she's been very kind and gracious to answer some of my questions, and just told me that she'll be happy to assist me in any future questions that I may have. And some of the material that some of the slides within my project, I gathered some of the information from, I butcher her name, but I'm just going to say Jennifer. She has a pamphlet that she put out. I want to say it's been about 45 years that is very helpful on guardianships. It's pretty thick, but it is extremely, extremely helpful. My timeline for my project, I hope to gather the information that is needed and have everything kind of done by October of this year. It is I say accelerated timeline. I'm hoping to be able to do that, but the more that I have actually within the last few days spoken with Mr. Tucker, I do think that's a little bit too accelerated. And I'm going to need to take a little longer to do some more thorough research, because I in no way want to put out information that is not 100% correct to anyone. So I want to make sure that I am extremely thorough in my research and talking to the stakeholders within my project to make sure that everything that I put out is indeed, correct information that they need. And so what I plan on doing is researching. There are different. There are a couple of different types. I don't know if types is the right word, but say guardianships. There are also conservatorships, power of attorney. And I think we have spoken about the Colby Act. And so that is with the supported decision-making. So I want to do a lot more reading and research on my own behalf, and then go to my stakeholders with what I have received from my own research, and then go to them and say, hey, am I interpreting this correctly? Can I now put this information out to people that I may want to speak with? I will tell you the lessons that I learned through my own journey with my son is that I think some people may look at, I had people that frowned upon me when I did tell them, some of my very close friends, when I told them that I would be getting a guardianship of my adult child. They felt like I was taking all of his rights away. I have very much tried to explain to them that that is not at all. Well, let me go back. You don't owe anybody an explanation. Let me say that I chose to try to just explain, no, I'm in no way trying to take away my son's right. He is a human being with a brain that functions. He can make certain decisions. However, understanding my son the way that I do, and knowing that he does have cognitive disabilities and that he does not process and or understand things at the level that maybe you or I do, that it is incumbent upon me as a parent to be a good parent and try to be able at this point in his life to advocate for the things that he cannot advocate for himself. So I did that to assure that he is getting all of the things he needs, when he needs it, how he needs it. So I can have a voice in that. Without the piece of paper that I had to go to the court to get, I would not be able to help him. And it has been invaluable to me personally. I'm in no way advocating to get a guardianship. I'm simply telling you my journey, my story, what I've gone through thus far with my child. And it has been something that I am grateful that I do have, because I have been able to speak for him in situations where he's called me. I have had people try to get him to sign things. And I have told him explicitly, don't you ever sign anything that you have not read or understand. If you don't understand it, you call me. Thank God that he does. Because there was something within the last 3 months. And I'm like, this is ridiculous that people, but unfortunately there are people out there who do try to take advantage of people. Does anybody have any questions?
Um, As a part of this, do you have any plans when you compile this to put like, the words escaping me, but like ahead of this, some of your personal experiences? Cause I think that when the guardianship has been beneficial like that, but more expounded on, because I think for parents that as well as the information that's also invaluable. You know what I mean, like that's.
Are you asking, am I planning on, I think what I hear you asking is that, is my plan to, my personal story that I've gone through, to expound on that and have that available, I guess, or for somebody to ask me questions or something of that nature, or?
Yeah, your personal story, because I think that it's, I mean, we're given all these different information and different avenues when it comes to guardianship or self-directed and different things like that. And obviously people advocate for all different things, but at the same time, I think it's really important that you look like deep in and not just and at the nitty gritty of it all, and like the experiences and not just the face value. Like lots of people are like, oh no, like no to guardianship and Britney Spears and, you know, but,
And it's very true.
yeah. But then at the same time, like things that you said spoke to me when you were speaking. And
Well, I'm glad.
I just want you to say, like, I think that at the same, I think that is an important part of it too. And I hope that you include that, or at least you're willing to share it with other parents.
Answer your question. I am an open book. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've been through a lot with my son because of his significant health issues. So to answer your question, yes, I had not thought about it, but I will be honest with you. The person that assisted me with the PowerPoint, because I'm horrible with PowerPoint, what she said to me, she said, Yvette, just get up, tell your story, and you'll be fine. And I'm grateful that she told me that, because I'm not nervous. I thought I would be, but I'm talking about something that I am passionate about, something that I know about, something I have truly been through, walked every step of the way, and still right now am going through something that I'm probably going to bug Mr. Tucker about next week to just get his advice, as well as go back to the person his name is Bruce Grimster in Huntsville, Madison County, who actually did my guardianship for me. So yeah, I have absolutely no problem doing that. And Miss McKelvey, when I was at the presentation for Carney Law, she actually has contacted me since. I talked to her maybe 15, 20 minutes. She's called me and asked me to share my story with some reporter. She said, I just find it so intriguing what you've been through. The incident with the medical person who I mentioned, I'm trying so hard not to slip. She told me that was just very interesting. And she said, would you mind sharing that story? She said, because she found it very unbelievable, which everybody that I have talked to in the legal field, even my insurance company, and I didn't mention that, I ended up calling Blue Cross Blue Shield and I told them, you will not pay her. When she sends this bill through, I said, do not pay her. I have a number. Now I've forgotten what she calls it. It's like say a case number with Blue Cross for that particular phone call. I have referenced it probably 4 times since to make sure that she does not get paid. I have also, and I will just tell you, she is a social worker. I have contacted the Board of Social Work. I had the attorney, he helped me draft a letter because he said they need to know that she ignored something that is court ordered. I sent her a certified letter. She acted as if she hadn't seen it. He said, okay, let's do this. You sent her something that she has to sign for. I did that. And that's when she told me afterwards. And I am not making any excuses up. She said, your son is over the age of 14. I will tell you, like I tell all of my clients, I owe you nothing. If he wants to talk to me, I will talk to him. And after that, I didn't tell my son initially. I wanted to see if she was bold enough to call him again. He has a Thursday Zoom call. Guess what? He got the call Thursday. She did the appointment anyway. I'm like, okay, Friday morning, I was on the phone. Okay, let's get this moving. So yes, I don't mind sharing at all. I have no problem sharing anything. And I just want to reiterate, I am not at all. I know I've said this a couple of times, but I don't want anybody here or listening to feel that I am saying to get a guardianship or any sort of paper to say, you know, anything that you're taking away or right. Because I think that's how some people look at it. Oh, your child can't do anything. Not true. People thought he can vote. I mean, remember I talked to Nancy about that probably the first or second class because somebody told me he couldn't vote. And guess what? I believed him because I didn't know any better with a guardianship, but I didn't know any better. Made a phone call to ADAP. Guess what? Yes, he can vote because that was verbally told to me. Now, I will say I was remiss that I did not speak to the attorney who assisted me in getting the guardianship. I take fault for that because I probably should have asked him that when it was just verbally told to me, but I didn't, not knowing, but you know, we all live and learn. So you're not taking away the person's rights. You know, you're just trying to assist them. That's how I look at it. I'm assisting my son in things that I know that he needs assistance with. So.
Any more
Any more
questions?
questions? Well,
Okay.
thank you. Okay.
I did my project. Okay. My name is Angela Richardson. And my project was motivated also by my personal story with my son. My son was originally educated within his local zone school. However, when he finished elementary school, there was not a place that I wanted to send him. So by default, I end up homeschooling him. And I was never for homeschooling ever. I didn't even think I could do it. And I came home and cried because our plans fell through. And he walked up to me and he said, "Mom, everything is going to be okay." And he quoted a scripture to me. He quoted Revelation 21:3-4. And when he did that, I was like, oh, that's my answer. He's telling me what I need to do. I need to homeschool him. So I did. And in homeschooling him, for the first 3 years, it was a breeze. And I kind of mimicked what regular school was. We had classes at the zoo. We had classes at the McWane Center. It was rigorous. I was in and out of the house constantly. And I sat there just like I was his para. And we went through every class together as if he was in school and he had, would have his regular para. So I did that through 6th grade. I did it through 7th grade. I started to wean back. And then of course, by 8th grade, he was doing it on his own. He didn't want me sitting there. And of course, we fast forward to high school and he doesn't want me in the house now. So, a lifesaver was Full Life Ahead and also the Autism for Alabama Camp Frog, because I went there and they told me about Full Life Ahead. And because of my affiliation with Full Life Ahead, I was introduced to Alabama Vocational Rehabilitation Service. And so therefore Ashton started to receive services at 14 because he was homeschooled. And I want to say they refer to that as pre-ed services. So he was able to be exposed to that and receive services that way. And that really helped with transitional services and propelling him forward. And so to bring us to where we are now, I wanted Ashton, he's participated in Voc Rehab enough to where he's explored janitorial work. He's explored the hospitality industry, and he wanted to be able to explore something in the trades this year. And so someone informed me about an academy called the Academy of Craft Training. And what it does is it pulls juniors and seniors from within the city and it trains them in the trades, provides them with paid internships, job exploration, and all of the above. It would have been a phenomenal opportunity. We sought the approval of our district. Our district said no. So those are the opportunities we're talking about, is transitional opportunities that lead to job exploration, job training, and job placement. And of course, homeschoolers fall under alternative educational settings, but so do private school students. And these are because of conversations I've had with the field supervisor for Voc Rehab, is that private school students fall up under the same umbrella, and some of them are denied services within the district that I'm zoned for. And so why is this important and why should we care, or anybody care? Because Alabama has a huge workforce gap in the trade industry. And so if our children who have disabilities are, can work and hold a job in the trade industry and learn that trade, then why wouldn't an entity or an organization want to facilitate that? And so it benefits the community at large. It's an educational opportunity, but it also serves to seal a workforce gap. No. Okay, well, let me go forward. Okay, that's so as many of you have stated, parents often have dreams for their children, and no parent dreams this. No parent. And even as they go through this phase as teenagers, we're doing everything we can to pull them out of that phase. And if we look right here, I firmly believe that dream means determination reaps extraordinary achievements in the making. And whether we want our children to be in a boardroom, or if that's their dream, or to be in the trades, or to be in the medical field. And the medical field is very varied. They can be a doctor, they can be a nurse, a therapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, respiratory therapist, the list is endless, even CNA. And so we can all get that. And it's simply by making small tasks accomplishable. If we think back to when our kids possibly were in first grade and kindergarten, my son tying his shoe was huge. When I went to an event once and a 17-year-old sat beside me with autism and said, "Can you help me tie my shoe?" And I said, "That will not be my child." So I supplemented the occupational therapy that he received at school, outside of school, solely for the purpose of teaching him how to tie his shoes, how to use a pencil correctly, how to hold scissors correctly and cut. And I even went further when I wanted him to be able to participate in services, our religious services, to read the Bible. He couldn't hold the Bible and his eyes focus on what he was reading. So I went to his occupational therapist and his speech therapist and say, "What do I do? How can we accomplish this goal for him?" And they said, "Enlarge it, underline it, and print it out, copy and paste it in a Word document." And that's exactly what we did. And he got on stage, read his Bible reading. Nobody knew he was reading from a piece of paper because the paper was inside the Bible. And we did that for years until he could master reading the Bible. Now we use our tablets. And so what I want to do is create awareness in the disparity of choices for homeschool and private school students with their local educational agencies. Because just because you have the authority to say no, doesn't mean you should say no. And we all know that as parents. Sometimes my son is a big advocate for himself. He wants to know, okay, are you telling me this just because you're my parent, or is this the right thing for me to do? And he wants me to explain why he has to do something if I ask it of him. So agencies should be able to explain to us why they said no. And so how do I do that? Well, one thing I want to do is I want to create change, a continuity, and the policy our state lacks for homeschool and private school students. Again, I talk with, I've actually spoken with 2 field supervisors in Voc Rehab. Mine for my district has said that not only are kids like mine denied something like a transitional service, but some kids are even been denied OT and speech therapy because their parents are homeschooling, that their districts won't even refer them, and that they're coming to them independently, but they're running into roadblocks because of the district. And so how do I accomplish that? Well, my goal is to collaborate with organizations in Alabama to offer opportunities for educational reasons and competitive employment for neurodivergent students within their communities. And if we do that, if we can accomplish this, it's a win for the community. It's not just a win for my child, it's a win for the community. My child missed the deadline to participate in the program that I wanted him to participate in. But if I can achieve this, no other homeschool parent will have to go through what I went through. And so what I've learned in this class is that the Rehabilitation Act, Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has this common thread through their documents, is that Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals to live independently, enjoy self-determination, make choices, contribute to society, pursue meaningful careers, and enjoy full inclusion and integration in American society. And I changed this wording to the extent that they choose, because some people are not going to choose to be involved in certain things. So to the extent that you choose to be involved, you should have that right. And nobody's policies should impede that right. And so a no is not the end. So I received a no. I didn't let that end for me. When the local high school told me no, the principal said, and if you have questions, contact my supervisor. He gave me his name and email address and everything. Well, I did. I contacted the supervisor. He didn't respond readily. It took him a week to respond. And in the meantime, I was still making phone calls. And I ended up talking to an elected board official who said, Ms. Richardson, come down to the board meeting next Tuesday with you and your son. And I was like, okay, I will. Not only did me and my son go, my entire family went. We went as a family, and he said, sit on the front row and stay for the whole meeting. That way you get to meet the board members afterwards. I did. Not only did I go, but some friends went with us too as support. And the board was pulling for me, even though the district decided to say no. And so even when you hear a no, it can propel conversations that may eventually lead to a change. And ironically, the elected board official was willing to help me because he made a campaign promise to a mother who has a child with a disability. And he figured if he helped me, he was keeping a campaign promise. And so we all know that navigating life in general can be complicated. But if you add to that this thing called a disability, it becomes a maze. And many of you have talked about it. An IEP meeting, what was my lifesaver for all of the IEP meetings that I attended was the book, Special Education is a Right, Not a Favor. And every time I picked up the phone to call ADAP, they would direct me to a certain page. I would study it and read it till I knew enough, was confident enough, so that when I entered my IEP meetings, I knew what to ask for. When my son was 4, they did such a poor job of taking care of him that when he ended pre-K as a 4-year-old, I had 3 years of compensatory service. They gave me a check for $1,000 to send him to a special camp. So you can get what you need if you know how to ask. And I think I say that at some point. And so collaboration is important. We have to think outside the box. And I chose this picture on purpose because the world thinks that our kids have to fit in a box, but all of these people are not in the box. And that was on purpose because we have to think outside of the box to come up with creative solutions to fit the needs of our children. And if we come up with those creative solutions, it actually works not only to benefit our children, but any child that comes behind them. And so Alabama Developmental Disabilities Network has truly helped me. I put this in here on purpose because every organization supports partners. And I know that I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't participated in this class, that I would have never went down to speak to the board. I would never have the other relationships that I've been building because of partners. And so what are those other relationships? Because of the collaborative efforts, the Alabama Developmental, these are just state organizations that you can affiliate yourself with so that you can work with other organizations. So the Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Alabama Department of Voc Rehab, the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, the Center for Excellence on Developmental Disabilities at UAB, and then the nonprofit organizations. I've been working with Full Life Ahead since 2019 and attending their camps. Triumph worked with my son, I want to say 2 summers ago, and they were like, he doesn't need to come back through here, but I have to go back through them to be able to get him services for this summer. Last Tuesday, I attended a webinar and I learned about Voices for Alabama's Children. It really spoke to me because they said they're not a political organization, but they learn about policy and they work to affect change. And what was huge is that one of the speakers said that brick and mortar schools are not the future of education. And many parents feel that way, but it's all they know. And so think about, when we think about all the school shootings, a lot of us are afraid to send our kids to school. And so I know a lot of my friends homeschool their kids for that very reason. They were afraid to send their kids to school. And so if those are the reasons we're keeping them home, then this should appeal to a lot of people. And so whether a door is closed or open often depends on our approach. If the door is closed, if we put forth our best foot and we have meaningful conversations, then that door can open. So what I was able to do is that even though my son was not able to attend the Academy of Craft Training, I was trying to get him enrolled in Auburn. He wasn't selected to be a part of their Discovery Camp for the summer. It was a week program, but I did create an internship with a family friend in Voc Rehab and Triumph, where they've collaborated together to provide him with an internship. Of course, Voc Rehab suggested it as an unpaid internship, but he's worked 2 summers and earned a paycheck. So I simply told my family friend, whatever you decide to pay him will be between you and I, or you, I, and Ashton. That way he still gets a paycheck. He still earns money for whatever work he does this summer. But that's because we collaborated and came up with a workable solution. And we actually met at Triumph. The Voc Rehab rep came, Ashton and I both were there, and Triumph was there, and we came up with a solution. And they're gonna allow Ashton to use the insurance. I wanna say it's something Voc Rehab offers through Triumph, so that for liability reasons, he's covered if he gets hurt on the job. And so what I've also learned is that networking is essential. And when we see here, this has dots and lines, because that's what it takes. We have to connect the dots and lines with people that can influence change. And, you know, we've learned here that those are called policymakers. And so I've talked to a lot of policymakers because networking equals positive outcomes. I've talked with the principal at the local high school. I've sent dozens of emails. I spoke with, I included, and every email I sent, I included the superintendent. I included my ADAP representative. I reached out to, when Tim McCartney and Jane Bertishaw were here in January, I asked them that question on the panel and they said, reach out to us. I did, and they followed up. When I say Mr. McCartney not only followed up, he followed through. He responds to every email I send him, and he says, if you don't hear from someone within 14 days, reach back out to me. And if I reach back out to him, he calls them and he reminds them of my issue and why I'm calling. Not only did I speak with, I've mentioned the field supervisors. Of course, we spoke with Jenny Shavers, and it was just amazing that she chairs the Children and Senior Advocacy Committee. It was just amazing that she chaired that, and I was able to present my issue to her. Even right now, where I work at part-time, because of conversations, I was able to speak with a lobbyist, Ashley McLean, I think her name was. I've been able to speak with the chief of staff to the state superintendent. I've contacted all 4 major news outlets in Birmingham: CBS, ABC, Fox, and 3340. And I even contacted, some of you may know her, Trisha Crane for Alabama.com. I emailed her my story, and I wasn't sure she was going to respond, but when she accepted my request on Facebook, I figured I piqued her interest. And ironically, I work with someone who is friends with her. So she said, your story sounds so amazing. You need to connect with Trisha McCrane. I was like, who is that? So I Googled her and sent her my story. And so work to do. I know there's work still to do because effective March 10th, while we were in Montgomery, I received notification that I was going to be able to serve on the Birmingham Good VR Consumer Advisory Council. And so Good, of course, represents the Governor's Office on Disabilities. And their mission aligns with all of our mission, which is for our children or our loved ones that live here in Alabama to have access to education, employment, housing, healthcare, and recreation. Because for some of them, for some persons that are affected with disabilities, they may not ever be able to work. They may not ever be able to drive. So all they may be able to do is to go out in their community and involve themselves in their community recreationally. And that may be all that they're able to do. And if that's all they're able to do, they should be able to do that. And so the lessons I've learned is don't be afraid to ask for what you want. Even if you get a no, still ask, because the worst thing is that you'll be exactly where you are right now. But if you ask, you can propel yourself forward. And so, any questions?
Any questions for Angela?
The only other thing I did is that I did create a public service announcement because I want other people in Alabama to know that what's out here and what's available to them and what's at their resources. I've left camp before at Full Life Ahead and went home and emailed 20 families because of the information I got. So it's like, okay, wait a minute, this is so much information, somebody can benefit from it. So if I can benefit from it, then I want other people to know what's available to them.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer.
Any last minute questions?
I just want to say, I think it's fabulous what you're doing. We experienced that kind of discrimination with our son in a different school district where we live. And yeah, and I see it happen all the time. So big time bravo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Rucker. And it's kind of a hard act to follow Angela in such an ambitious project that she has. But as she ended with recreation, I thought, wow, that's a great seg into my project, which, as you can see, is explorability and will offer persons with disabilities greater opportunities for tourism in Alabama. And before I jump into explaining explorability, I too want to acknowledge Linda and Brooke, James and Nancy and Daryl, Pippa as a unit to give me this opportunity. I have had this idea, and when I share my story, you will know why, but I didn't know how to express it. I had heard of Pippa many, many years ago, strictly as a disability rights advocate, never thinking until this year, a couple of months ago, that I could merge Pippa with this idea that I had and an opportunity in several different places that my family has had the privilege of being taken, the advantage of the privilege. And my story is the Ruckers love to travel. Meredith has fallen in love with travel videos, especially Walter's World. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he is a professor and he has a little video blog of going all over the world. And he will tell you 5 things you're going to love about Rome and 5 things you're going to hate about Rome, and or wherever the country is. And she will come to the table when we start this discussion about travel and where we're going to go on our next vacation. And years ago, we were in Canada and we went to one of the parks there, And at the admission ticket office, when we were, paying, it was like, oh, you don't pay for her. And I gave them this strange look and he said, oh no, we welcome people with disabilities here and there is no admission for your daughter and a parent because they recognize that the person with the disability typically has to have a companion. So explorability is my hope that people with disabilities will be able to explore all of the entertainment, cultural, educational opportunities that we have for entertainment and recreation in Alabama at reduced or no cost. So I am hoping, and I will ask for your prayers in this endeavor, that we can form a partnership with the Alabama Department of Tourism, specific municipality, convention, and visitor bureaus across our state, as well as museums and educational centers, major amusement attractions to waive admission fees for individuals with the disability and one adult companion. We're also going to encourage our venues to make their facilities more accommodating for persons with sensory integration specific needs. So it's any venue who will want to participate. So why should we explore ability? We all know that it takes a little bit more money in a family's household budget if you are caring for an individual with a disability. Statistics show that families living with an adult with a disability require an average of 28% more income to enjoy the same standard of living as compared to a household without a person with a disability. And so when faced with the choice, do I spend $25 on an admission to the zoo for 6 people in my family or my week's groceries? What am I going to do? So often it's a prohibiting factor in the cost to enjoy that opportunity. So waiving the admission cost for the individual with a disability and at least one adult companion will create educational and recreational opportunities that had once been constrained by financial limitations. Also, increased opportunities for social interaction along with physical exercise and mental stimulation reduce stress and aid in a person's well-being. And we know sometimes that we just need that break, that life gets so stressful and we just want to take our kids somewhere. We want to go do something fun. And then you start driving there and you think, oh my gosh, what if they do this? What if they do that? What if they run away? What if they start yelling? What are all the significances that could happen based on that person's disability? How am I going to cope? Where are we going to go? And so it often, here again, prohibits a family from taking advantage of a cultural or entertainment opportunity. We want our venues to provide accommodations such as Braille, closed captioning, voiceover, sensory kits, and safe rooms to make tourisms more welcoming to persons with those specific sensory needs. Because here again, it lowers the stress. Everybody has fun. Nobody's staring at my child or wondering what in the world's going on or why I'm having to get down on my knees and look my child in the face or take him by the hands. We've had some issues where people have been ostracized, or it's like, somebody talk to that mom. What is she doing? So we want it to make a good situation for everyone. And then more importantly, we want to improve Alabama's reputation across the country and across the world. We have had this opportunity in Italy, in France, and in Greece. The European countries in their parliament in 2019 kind of made an informal but formal pact to offer the waiving of admission costs to persons with disability because they just realized the value of it. They're also integrating so many opportunities for the sensory and accessible needs for persons with physical disabilities as well to make it more accommodating. So the goals would be that Alabama would become recognized as a state that values diversity. It welcomes its visitors with disabilities, because we've come back and have shared our story with so many people, and they'll go, well, how come we don't do that here? And it's like, I don't know. We need to educate the Department of Tourism on how explorability could be a win-win for Alabama, its citizens with disabilities, their families, and of course, our out-of-state visitors, kind of a ripple effect. And we visualize that our disability rights advocacy organizations will help spread the word. And it's just going to be a lot of free advertising for these venues. Also to educate the target venues of increased opportunities for additional patrons, which is going to increase their revenue, because you have to, you know, everyone has to exit the gift shop on the way out. And it will also be just good PR for that particular venue. And then also we want to respect the rights of individuals with disabilities to participate in meaningful and fun activities alongside their non-disabled peers. Create new social opportunities, allow people to go where they typically might not have ever had an opportunity to think about going. And we want them to be able to feel comfortable and not kind of weird or not welcomed at these particular venues. These opportunities are already in action across the globe. In Ireland, they have an award-winning website, Mobility Mojo, that provides a lot of information of where a person with a disability can feel comfortable. Hotels, restaurants that have accessibility, have quiet rooms, reduced accommodating lighting for persons with sensory needs. We know that our National Park Service offers free lifetime passes for persons with disabilities, and we are going to encourage our state parks to do so. After doing some research, I found out that Jenny Schaefer, whom we met in March, is on the tourism committee. And so depending on a meeting that I have coming up, I thought Mrs. Schaefer might be my fallback person as well. Oh, good. We have benefited in our own country from several museums that we have visited in New York that do not charge persons with disabilities an admission fee. And they offer extraordinary visual signage and publications, sign language tours, hearing loops to accommodate those persons with the disability, to make understanding and valuing what they have in their museum more meaningful to that person. In Birmingham, we have Culture City. It is a business that creates this sensory accessible resources, and they have partnered with, as you can see, McWane Center, Botanical Gardens, the Museum of Art, and the zoo. And most of our local libraries also have the sensory kits to make their patrons more relaxed when they are visiting that facility. So I am looking at our partners to become the Alabama Department of Tourism, the major municipal visitor and convention bureaus. Many museums are run by nonprofits, like the McWane Center is a nonprofit organization. And then you have places like the Safari Park, the Wildlife Sanctuary in Hope Hull, that's privately owned. And then, of course, our statewide disability advocacy organizations, we've become a vehicle to announce these opportunities. I've had a initial meeting with the Greater Birmingham Visitor and Bureau Convention. They have talked about this idea in the past, but they've never put it into action. And so Their board is discussing it right now. And she has invited me to be a speaker at one of their next quarterly meetings where all of the Central Alabama entertainment venues come together. And so that could be a launching pad. In progress, and this is where I'm asking for your prayers. I have a meeting on May 2nd with Lee Centel, who is the Director of Tourism for the state of Alabama. I have also talked to some just individuals who have connections with local venues about developing focus groups to see exactly what they need, how we can get the word out, how we can encourage that participation at that particular venue. Those of you will remember Eric Brown, who I believe spoke to the group in February. Eric and I have had a couple of meetings. He is developing a logo for Explorability, and we're on our 3rd draft right now. And because we want to, we have the slogan in Alabama, Alabama the Beautiful, but we want to say Alabama more than beautiful. We want it to be seen as a welcoming and open opportunity for visitors with disabilities to have such a comfort level when they come to Alabama. And then we need to develop a venue partnerships portfolio, I'm calling it, to identify those persons and those places that will participate, our communication path, how we'll get it out to the general public, what social media platforms we could. And then last, our timeline. I have the meeting, like I said, with Mr. Centel in a couple of weeks. Then we will hope to start to identify our target venues within the 3-month period, be in communication with those target venues. Hopefully 6 months from now, we can launch Explorability across the state, if not before, or at specific locations, and then come back with our partners and do an assessment of how the program is working within 1 year. So I thank you for especially Pippa to give me this opportunity to do it. And I welcome anybody that wants to join and participate. If you know people and can help open doors, I will be grateful for your participation. And again, I thank you so much for supporting me in this opportunity.
Good afternoon. My name is Niles Valentine, and this is my 2023 PIPA leadership project. I was working with Audra Broughton and Chantel Kellogg as well. So my main goal is to discuss the finance of special education programs within the school systems, specifically refinancing programs that are working and cutting funding to programs that are not working. Why, you may ask? Because simply put, not enough money is being spent on special education programs. It is an individual's right to receive the best education with accommodations, not a luxury, not an entitlement, a basic right. So Chantel and I actually reviewed Mobile spending on employee travel, which is one point that just kind of galled me. In November of 2022, there's a charge of $1,160.76. That is an exact number for very good reason, for the Flamingo in Las Vegas, an old casino now. It is a Hilton, we get that, but it is also a casino, and it's for the teachers to travel there. There's many more just like this, but the reason why I'm focusing on that exact number is because that's the exact number that we found. And whenever we hear that they don't have the money or they can't finance it, someone earlier brought up how they can't really discuss finances, or they always say that, if they say that we don't have the money for that, that's not really a disqualifying factor. Even to that excuse, that's demonstrably wrong. that's demonstrably a lie. It's not the only instance or even trend of taxpayer money not being spent where it shouldn't. So who am I going to meet with to discuss this? The Mobile County Public Superintendent, Chester Threadgill, the head of special education, Sharon McGee, and my boss and the director of the Independent Living Center, Dr. Eric Peebles. We're all going to discuss this. I specifically want to ask Chester Threadgill and Sharon McGee if they know that these charges exist, if they know that how money is being spent. So our project timeline, it is honestly quite simple. I'm presenting it to you today on, well, the 15th. I wrote the 14th because I thought we were going to present yesterday. The day of the meeting is June 15th, 2023. That's the day of the meeting. As for why there are no further dates is because we're going to discuss what programs are working so that we can refinance those programs, what programs are not working so that we can cut those programs and reallocate that money into programs that are proving to work. Not increasing the budget, not even increasing the budget, just refinancing programs that are working, moving money away from things that we do not need. In doing so, we're going to bring more technology to the students and update current programs that are being used, as well as give these students and teachers every resources that they are entitled to, that they have a right to. So the work that we still have to do, we are a work in progress, but it is trackable, visible project as shown by the fact that we got this meeting with the superintendent and the special education director. We'll have to see what the results of the June 15, 2023 meeting are actually. So that's why I'm asking you to stay tuned for that. So what I've learned in all of this, advocacy is hard. It's hard work. It's not easy, but it's very much worth the fight. It's also important to be friendly and firm. We are not here to say that everything is hunky-dory and that everything is okay. We're here to ask for change because it is a need. Actually, it's a basic human right, not a luxury, not a need, not an entitlement, a basic human right that we deserve. It's not always going to be glamorous either. Chantel and Audra, they couldn't make it today because of the fact that they were doing advocacy work, and it takes its toll. There are times where I do want to sit down and just say, you know what, it's somebody else's problem. But no, I can't do that. Not for myself, not for anybody that I advocate for, not for anyone that I work with, that I work for. It's worth every single moment of every single fight. And see my email and Chantel's email here. Any questions? So Chantel pulled much of the information, as did Audra. However, you said the Freedom of Information, that website, correct? Yes, ma'am. And I'm tempted to go on a tangent about how they did not like it when I did that. I'm very much tempted to go on that tangent, but I know I don't have so much time here. But however, I will say this, that meeting that I told you was happening on June 15th, Dr. Eric Peebles and I have already told them exactly what we're coming there for. They know that our tone, we're going to be friendly, we're going to be eloquent, but we want change to happen. We actually want meaningful solutions to be discussed that day. He most certainly is, as is Chantel, and hopefully Audra can join us as well. I'm going to need it, Maria.
Any more questions for Niles? Thank you. Hard work.
But
As
it's well
Mr.
worth it.
Powell would say, go make good trouble.
But it's well worth it.